Political Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution. And it's bigger than Trump, y'all. It's way bigger than Trump. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. All right, I got some revolutionary dinner for y'all because revolution is a way of life and revolution is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We got nighttime classes, y'all. We're going to get right into this information. We know President Trump has been elected, but the deep state is busy. He's have appointed a bunch of neocons and war hawks. We know World War III is on the table, but will they leave him in power? Let's find out.
Trump met with outgoing President Biden and thanked him for a quote-unquote smooth transition, but there are a lot of deep state swamp rats who are trying to bring down President Trump. And our next guest, Roger Stone, on Monday warned that he is worried about the security and safety of President Trump and that there are deep state forces that are trying to keep him from putting his hand on the Bible on January 20th in Washington, D.C. to become the next president. And we thought we'd invite Roger on in the midst of all of this chaos right now to talk about it. Roger, good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Clayton, great to be back with you.
So a lot of moving pieces over the past few days. Has anything changed from your warning a few days ago, worrying about Trump's safety and sort of these, whatever deep state Democrat swamp rats that are trying to keep him from becoming president of the United States? The Democrats have been kind of silent, and that's kind of scary to me. I know we had a couple of viewers yesterday say the Democrats have been a little quiet, and that's scary. Are they cooking up something that we should be concerned about?
Yeah, I think we have to absolutely assume that they're up to something diabolical because people do not, these kind of people particularly, do not give up power voluntarily. The will of the people means nothing to them. They proved that in 2020. And the president's mandate now is so broad, so sweeping. He really is in an extraordinarily strong position to forge an entire golden age of America. We could have the most unprecedented peace, prosperity, opportunity, and justice and security this country has ever seen. But to do that, he's going to have to dismantle our current elite cabal that, in conjunction with their allies in the media, have a very different idea about America. So my number one concern is his safety. Now, if there hadn't already been 2 assassination attempts against him that we know of, you might say, well, that's just a conspiracy theory. But no, they tried to kill him twice. And those particularly who think that perhaps appropriately, they will be put on trial for treason because there's treasonous activity, in my opinion, in the Russian collusion hoax. I think that they will go to any length whatsoever. So all these people now hitting me up on my phone for inauguration tickets, I'm not sure I want to see him out on the portico taking the oath of office, in public. I kind of wish that he would do it in a private, highly secured ceremony inside with all the necessary officials. It's not that he's afraid. He's afraid of nothing. He knows no fear. But I do fear some other attempt to destroy him. I worry about it when he flies, for example. Back when I was a lobbyist for Angola, for the Angolan freedom fighters, I helped them get shoulder-launched, Stinger missiles. They can take down an airplane. So that's my number one concern. And look, I'm not in the security business, but I am a soldier in the army of God, and I pray about it every single day.
It's terrifying, and especially when, yes, we've had all of the failures of the Secret Service over the past couple of months, and now he gets to appoint the head of the Secret Service, somebody who's going to protect him. He gets to pick his own security detail in many ways and make sure that he is safe and secure. In many ways, that might be the most important appointment that he makes.
Yeah, I completely agree. I also agree with something that our friend Sean Hannity often says. The problem in all these agencies are not in the middle or the lower levels of the agency. I think you have a lot of good men and women there who are committed, to the rule of law and to doing their job. The problem lies at the leadership levels of these organizations. When my home was raided by 29, fully SWAT-clad FBI agents brandishing fully automatic M4 assault weapons, they were in my house for 13 hours. They would look at you and roll their eyes. They would wink at you, like as if to say, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. I'm doing this because I was ordered to do it. So I do think we need somebody at the top of the FBI, particularly of the Central Intelligence Agency, particularly of the Secret Service, particularly, who's prepared to clean out those agencies and ensure that those who are there are committed to the rule of law and the protection of the president and the country.
You mentioned the Lawfare piece of this, right? I mean, coming to your house and all of that, and then everything they've been going after Trump. It seems to me that there's a respite now. Jack Smith set to maybe step down, pulling back on these on his prosecutions. But then you have Letitia James in New York saying we're ready, we're battening down the hatches, we're getting ready. This Lawfare piece, like I'm a glass half full kind of guy on a normal day, but something seems fishy with this. Are they done going after Trump on the Lawfare side?
I think zero chance. First of all, if I were Letitia James, people in glass houses should not throw stones. She is right now fighting freedom of information requests regarding sexual assault by her own chief of staff, which I believe she has covered up. She's also trying to deny the public access to records about some of her own misconduct in that area. She's protected by a corrupted system, but ultimately, I think the public's going to learn about those things. Also, there is the financing of her entire career. Back when she was on the city council, remember, a contribution to the New York City Council of under $250 gets put through a 10-to-1 campaign finance match. So if the money was illegal to begin with, and much of it I can prove was, and then was matched with the taxpayers' money, there's two violations there, two very serious violations. It's kind of like with Eric Adams. No, this was not that he just got a coach ticket bumped up to first class, or he got an extra Virgin, Bloody Mary. He took $10,000 from Turkey illegally. He gave it to straw donors. He washed it through the state's campaign finance program, turning that into almost $800,000. And in return, he allowed the Turks to inhabit a building that had no occupancy certificate and should have had it. He also, in the case of Letitia James and Eric Adams, there were multiple complaints about prostitution and drug activity and sex trafficking in this club in the Bronx that they all had almost like their clubhouse, but those were quashed. There was never any investigation. So I would say, again, people in glass houses should not be throwing stones.
The deep state swamp rats that, of course, even Candace Owens was warning about yesterday, swirling around Trump, trying to bring down his presidency. Maybe that's their strategy. They've tried assassination. They've tried lawfare. They've tried all of these strategies, maybe to try to undermine him once again.
What they're going to do is they just going to take us to war. He didn't already put him in power. They just going to take us to war. He's not going to be able to stop it, bro. He's not going to be able to stop the war with Iran and Israel. He can't make them humble themselves in Ukraine. He can't do it. It's bigger than him.
Trump admitted that his biggest mistake from the first go-around was that he had too many deep state swamp rats around him. This time, I think, you certainly involved. There's been great celebrations to have that Mike Pompeo, man who tried to assassinate Julian Assange, is not going to be in this administration. Nikki Haley, absolutely thrilled that she's not going to be in this administration. So we're getting some wins. Are you concerned at all about some of these picks that we have been confirmed by Donald Trump on Truth Social that he has officially appointed or nominated, I should say, for some of these positions? Or are you worried about the deep state swamp rats circling Trump?
First of all, in terms of those appointments that we know to be real, I mean, that are confirmed, I have to say,
Yeah, exactly.
no, I don't have any concern. For example, I think the appointment of Tom Homan is a great appointment. He is a tough,
Yes.
no-nonsense guy. And if you're going to do, as Dwight Eisenhower did, you're going to deport millions of illegals. Eisenhower deported 1.3 illegals who had criminal records from the country. It can be done. It just takes the will and the know-how. Tom Homan's the man for that job. Very pleased with that appointment. I have no problems with anybody who's been formally announced yet. I have a few reservations about those who are speculated against, but I warn people in this atmosphere, there's a huge amount of information out there that's not necessarily true. And in the internal maneuvering, the way to sink a candidacy is to plant a story that says so-and-so will be appointed to this position when they haven't been. Then they get blamed for putting out that leak, even though they themselves did not do it. This is the oldest trick in the book. Look, I was the head of youth for McKinley. I've been around a long time. I've seen this act and the way they leak to try to take out prospective candidates.
Right. Then you get this enormous backlash, and then it's a convenient cover for you to be able to say sorry. A lot of people wondering if Trump is going to pull one of those Mitt Romney moments again, invite him in, big interview, show him the door, and kick him out. What Trump better than just about anyone. What do you think is Trump's biggest blind spot right now, walking back into the swamp once again?
Well, look, I love Donald Trump. I owe him my life. He does like flatterers. There's no question about that. This is how I think Mike Pompeo got away with it so long, until Donald Trump realized that Mike Pompeo not only is the guy who talked him out of releasing all of the JFK assassination documents, he is the guy who actively pushed a CIA plot to assassinate Julian Assange, who is a journalist. Does the same thing that you do, that you've done your whole life, takes facts and makes them known to people. Maybe he never read the Pentagon Papers case. I'm not sure about that. But also Mike Pompeo is the guy who insisted that the Jack Smith classified documents case was legitimate, which it wasn't under the presidential pardon.
You're also the guy with Mark Milley, the chief of staff, that traitor, he should be arrested, forced Trump hand to assassinate General Soleimani. Forced him to do that. That was a big mistake. Iran is still pissed about that. They should have never killed that man. That man was fighting ISIS.
So very happy. I like to think that maybe he read my Substack piece on this, because I did Mike Pompeo's greatest hits and I sent it to him. I also kind of reminded him about Nikki Haley and her treachery in the same piece. And the very next morning, he put out that famous posting on Truth Social and X saying that they would not be joining the administration. Now, I'm not saying it was cause and effect, but I like to think I contributed.
Yes, and I have separate sources that will confirm that your work on this was instrumental. So thank you, Roger, for that. I think we can all applaud you for making sure that Mike Pompeo and Nikki Haley are nowhere near this administration. So thank you from the bottom of my heart on that one. I think, looking forward, we've got 68 days now till Inauguration Day. What are you hoping? I'll get you out of here on this, Roger. What are you hoping that Trump will do over these next 68 days? And what are you hoping he will expose over the next 68 days, if anything?
Well, I'm very anxious to see where he places Tulsi Gabbard in his administration. She is one of the most talented, impressive women I have ever met in 45 years in politics. She's an amazing communicator. She's up with Reagan when it comes to her abilities as a communicator. And having served on the Armed Services Committee, having served 4 terms in Congress, having been vice chairman of the DNC and seeing how that party has been taken over by radical socialists and Marxists, a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, a combat veteran in both Iraq and Kuwait, and no one, literally no one, other than Donald Trump and J.D. Vance themselves, no one worked harder for this victory. 31 days on the road straight, speaking to rallies with RFK, on her own with the president and RFK. She's someone I really want to see in this administration. Also true of Kash Patel. Kash Patel did more to expose the Russian collusion hoax than anyone, save perhaps his boss, Devin Nunes. He is someone I want to see in this administration. I hope the president will avail himself of those talents. These are the kind of people he needs around him who understand they weren't elected president. Donald Trump was elected president. Their job is to carry out his agenda, not to dilute it, not to slow it down, not to cancel it. I think that those are two things that I'll be looking very keenly for, and I'm very optimistic. I know the president shares my high regard for both of them. And then lastly, of course, is Robert Kennedy. See, I think that the move to make America healthy again is vital. I want to see him in a position where he can make sure that happens. He deserves a huge amount of credit for this victory. I just saw an authoritative study, 86% of his voters showed up and voted for Donald Trump. The rest of those people were never going to vote anyway. There were people he brought into the process. That's a miraculous number. He worked very hard to make sure that happened. So I'm looking for a strong appointment by him as well. Those are the three things that are on my mind today.
Yeah, I think you and I are in alignment like that. I would love over the next 6 months to find out that our children's school lunches are now suddenly healthy. They've removed pizza from the menu. They've removed processed foods from our diet. And, you know, it's make America healthy again. I mean, why is the United States of America the fattest country in the world? I mean, it's so sad. And cancer's exploding across the United States. So I'm with you on that one. Roger, great to see you.
All right. Well, last week after the election, the FBI announced that it had 2 men in custody and had indicted 3 men for a plot to assassinate President Trump. It came out plat, but I mean plot. What they're saying is they have men in custody who were plotting to assassinate President Trump, and this was BS. At the behest of the Iranian government. Now,
that's BS. Iran already came out. They don't got to lie. They want to whack it. They'll let you know. They're not scared of the U.S. That is not them. It's the CIA. It's the government. They're warning Trump. They're trying to pull old Lee Henry Oswald, blame Russia. Gonna try to blame Iran if Trump get hit. And Iran is letting Trump, the world, and everybody else know that's BS. And he got to watch the CIA.
Now, in the words of the Libertarian Institute, shaky is what we would use the word to describe this evidence. Even weirder is that one of these people who was indicted had been an FBI informant several times who they say passed on bad intel, but they believe them that when they said that the Iranian government sanctioned this assassination. So it's strange. We're going to try to go through it. Here is the announcement of this. You can find it at justice.gov and then click through to find the criminal complaint for yourself. Notice here it says that they indicted 3 men. 2 of them are from New York. One of them is known as Pop. Just Pop.
Corn Pop?
Just Pop. And the... one of them is from Iran, and they're being indicted for trying to kill a U.S. citizen of Iranian origin. Obviously, that's not Donald Trump. He's not from Iran. So where is Trump in all of this? I'm going to show you in a minute. But the man mentioned here, Farhad Shakeri, he was in contact with the FBI at least 5 times. Here, they wrote out all the phone calls that they had between September and October of this year alone. Why is he talking to the FBI so much if he's planning to kill Trump? The indictment later says that on these calls, he passed along what they now know is bad information. But for whatever reason, when he said that he was doing this on behalf of the Iranian government, that part they believe. Okay. The indictment says that he started this assassination plot of the U.S. Iranian person in December of 2023, again, targeting somebody else, not Trump. And it says that they wanted to kill this person because this Iranian U.S. citizen is an outspoken critic of the Iranian
Right.
government. So
Might
that's
go
why
down
they
about that
wanted him. But somehow along the way, they were told to pivot to Trump, who they call victim 4. Take a look here, where they said, we're planning to kill this other dude, basically. But then we got this word to start to ditch that project and put on all your focus on surveying and ultimately assassinating former president of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Now, can you imagine the FBI's file on Trump? Because this here, in this file, he is victim number 4. In the Michael Cohen file, he's co-conspirator number A or 1 or what have you. And then in many other cases, he's the main target. So what a mess their file on Trump must be. Now, how do we know that Pop and the other 2 were working on behalf of the government of Iran? The indictment just says that, but there's no sources, no backup. They just say, because Iran does this regularly, so that's why we're sure that they want this. There's no sourcing here. They don't prove it. They don't even seem to think they need to. So maybe they know that this is happening in a way they don't need to prove to us. But given how often the U.S. has sanctioned Iran over nuclear weapons that they have never proven, that threshold for wanting to see proof that this is from the Iranian government is pretty high now, right? We should demand proof of this. We should not believe them out of pocket. Now, I don't want to support a war based on lies and fall for another weapons of mass destruction narrative. So I think we need to see how they know that. That's what I'm asking. I want to know how. So we are led to believe that Iran wanted to kill Trump in and around October, even though in that same month, Trump publicly said that the U.S. has no business getting into a war with Iran. In fact, he said during a press conference in New Jersey, even before that, in August, he said, I'm not looking to be bad to Iran. We're going to be friendly, I hope, with Iran, but maybe not. But we're going to be friendly, I hope. We're going to be friendly. But they can't have a nuclear weapon. We're going to make sure they don't have a nuclear weapon, which, again, the IAEA has said many times that they know that they have not seen proof of Iran having a nuclear weapon. So are we to believe that even though Trump is saying, I would like diplomacy with Iran, Iran wants to kill him anyway, even though Trump's opponent at the time did not?
Iran said they want to arrest him for killing General Soleimani. He shouldn't have done that. They say they want to arrest him. They never said they want to kill him. But they absolutely said if they can arrest him, they want to arrest him. Him and Pompeo
want diplomacy with Iran. That's weird, right? Why would they want him and not the people who did want a war with Iran? J.D. Vance has said he's willing to hit Iran hard. So why Trump in this instance? It only makes sense in the context of those who have warned that this would be a false flag for a war with the Middle East in order to support Israel. And in fact, former CIA director, CIA employee, Michael Scheuer warned us about.
And that's the problem. The Mossad, the small hats, if they can get America to attack Iran, and remember, they don't give a damn how many U.S. soldiers die, all our bases get wiped out. No, as long as we can blow up all of the mosques and kill the supreme leader and set Iran back 50 years, the Israel will be happy. And they absolutely will assassinate Trump to get that done.
About this on Redacted just a few weeks ago.
They may be finished, Clinton, with shooters, but not with a truck bomb or an aerial weapon of some kind. And they can blame it on anybody. They've got all the gangsters in the country they need, and they can set them up. The FBI specialty is setting up Muslim terrorists. They get one not very bright Muslim suggest an operation. He goes out and gets some dumber
voted for Trump. Come on, now stop.
And then at the last moment, the FBI picks him up and calls it a victory against terrorism. So there's lots of other options out there. And it depends on how many people they're willing to kill as to what option. Right now, they seem focused just on him. But if it's his family, if it's his children, if it's a bunch of people who just work for him, I think there's no detriment. There's no hesitation on the part of the Democrats to preserve what they have to killing more than one person.
Okay, that does seem a lot like what happened here. The FBI had this guy, Shakari. He, by the way, had been in prison in the U.S. for 14 years for robbery, and then they deported him to Iran in 2008. And then he went back to Iran, and we're led to believe that it was there he picked up this assignment to kill some other Iranian U.S. citizens and then pivot to President Trump. and then somehow was working through his surrogates in New York. The FBI does acknowledge that this guy gave them bad information all along, but they somehow believe him when he.
Once we deported him, he went to Iran. He was working for the government. He was working for us then, and the Iranians know that, bro. They would never get that man. You've been to the U.S. prison, and then you back here. Oh hell no! They knew you was. They knew he was a snitch, an informant. And once he went to Iran, if he wasn't working for the Iranians, the United States would have never allowed that man to just come back to America. These people know Americans really don't understand that.
When he says that he's working for the Iranian government, it is all very much like the hypothetical that Michael Shore just laid out. So read it for yourself and let us know. Do you think that this is a flag in order to get us to support a war with Iran? Or is there something here that I didn't see? I welcome your comments very much.
See, that's why I had to name this bigger than Trump. Because all the pieces of the puzzles coming together, and we got to pay close attention. And him picking Marco Rubio and all these clowns and putting them in his cabinet, that's a sign that he's not in control of his own foreign policy. The small hats are, and they probably threatening his children. See, that assassination thing is a key to this. That Iran's going to kill you, that's a key to all of this, because it's not just him, it's his family too. You see? But putting those damn war hawks in control of foreign policy, that means World War III. Russia ain't gonna back down. Iran ain't nobody. I've been said that before all these wars started. I told y'all that. I've been corrected by the majority of that BS. Nobody's backing down from the United States anymore. Not none of them countries in Africa who got those advanced weapons. Venezuela not gonna back down. We're probably gonna go to war with them. We're gonna get that war. These neocons is in charge. You know? So we just got to prepare, because North Korea not backing down. Who gonna back down from the U.S.? Or nobody.
I wanted to ask you, Brian. We now know that Donald Trump is choosing people like Marco Rubio potentially for Secretary of State. We actually just got reports that there is now a new Secretary of Defense in the United States. He is a Fox News host who is
I mean, he got some white nationalists in his background too, man. That Secretary of Defense, I don't like that.
Let's just say an Iran and China hawk. He has been filling out his cabinet, national security advisors, China hawks, Mike Waltz, for example. Talk about your impression of these picks, because there was a lot of enthusiasm, I think, for people who follow geopolitics around our audiences and around the election of Donald Trump. But Pete Hegseth is now the Secretary of Defense. He is an Iran hawk. He calls it an evil regime. He is a China hawk. Anyone that is being picked by the Trump...
He Israel first, you see. These are deep down Zionists. And Israel won't war. They definitely hate Russia. See, it go back to the Khazarian. Y'all know who, but I can only say the Khazarian part. It go back to Russia forcing them. See, a lot of this, all this shit we're going through got to do when Russia forced them to choose a religion. For y'all who don't know, you need to look into the Khazarians. Anyway, Russia forcing them to pick a religion. And remember, they picked Judaism. Remember where they was at. They was in Ukraine. All of this bullshit has to do with history that they don't teach. But these people who the Russians forced, and a lot of them is in Israel right now, a lot of them are rabid Zionists who have taken over Europe. They've taken over Europe. They run Britain. They run France. They run Germany. The Germans are these people. This shit is deep. The Germans are these people. This is so crazy. Oh man, them and the Germans are the same people. That's for a whole other story. But they run all those nations. And the only nation they don't run is Russia, because Putin in power. You know, they the ones was causing all the terror in Russia, all that mass murder that was going on. Whenever they talk about a lot of the bullshit that was going on in Russia, they talk about those individuals who got ran out of Russia. But Putin is in the way. China's in the way. North Korea's in the way. these places, Syria, these places who they're not over their banking system. They're in the way. And they got these people will wish World War III to get Putin out the way, man. He in the way.
By Donald Trump right now seems to fit this pattern. What's your impression?
Yeah, literally every single person he has picked so far has, maybe with the exception of Elon Musk, maybe I'll get into that in just a bit. And his position is, well, I mean, I don't even know what this position that was created for him. And you know what Elon Musk and Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr., you know what they are. They are the sugar coating of this giant lump of arsenic that they're asking the American people to choke down. That's all they are, because literally everyone else who has orbited Trump during his campaign and now getting positions in his administration, these are all neocon warhawks. You remember Donald Trump Jr., no neocons or warhawks. We went from no neocons and warhawks to all neocons and warhawks. And forgive me for not being surprised, but this is literally what he did during his first administration. I tried to warn people then, because I actually looked at the people who surrounded him. I understand where real power stems from. It stems from money and guns. And in the United States, there is no alternative center of power with enough money and guns to make any meaningful change in American politics. It's a fact. It cannot happen. You cannot create something out of nothing. And even though the American people want this, they don't have the means to actually do it. And because Americans, like all human beings, including myself, we're capable of logic. And
I told y'all this. I've been telling y'all, the only thing that's gonna save us is the fall of this wicked land. You know, they got to go through what they got to go through. A lot of us got to go through it too. And the people who come out on the other side, then they will be able to build a new civilization. But it's not gonna be no good for us. You know, we try to think of a better day, but the people in power, they just so wicked. And now Trump has been put in power overwhelmingly by the people. The people put this man back in power to get some get back, because we want people to, you know, pay for what they've been doing. And look what they already done. They didn't seize this man administration, man, with threats of violence. Assassinate them. This is not no game. But threatening his family with death. Now this man is a man at the end of the day, a mere mortal. He got a son. He think about his grandkids, man. They were killing people, and say Al-Qaeda done it. And they fooled him. I know they told Trump, we're going to let you get your rivals in America. That's why Tulsi Gabbard and Robert F. Kennedy, y'all can do whatever y'all want in America. But I tell you yesterday, they're telling him we're going to do whatever we want in the world. And Trump sitting here thinking about get back on these people, and the people like, you let us deal with the world. And that's a mistake. Because how the world go, America going to go. And Trump making a big mistake because Vladimir Putin and I already warned him, man. You're not going to make it out of this. You're not going to make it out of this if they force his hand. Not this time.
And reason, but ultimately we're emotional creatures. So people are going to invest their hope in Trump because Trump promised them this. He promised them an anti-war campaign to divest from American imperialism abroad and invest in America. That is sound. That is something I would love to see. That is something I wish I could believe in and see unfold, but it just was never going to. He was just telling you what you want to hear so that he could get the support of war-weary Americans. And then once he's in office, he's going to go and do whatever he feels like, just like he did the first time. He is a politician, and he's doing exactly what politicians always do, almost without exception. I don't know why people thought he was the exception, especially since he already spent 4 years betraying his campaign promises and the core of his movement and the people he has surrounded himself with. The new U.S. ambassador to the UN, Elias Stefanik, board of directors of the National Endowment for Democracy, this regime change organization that spreads democracy all around the globe. A lot of the cultural war nonsense that right-wing conservatives detest. This is what the NED is promoting all around the world. And Stefanik plays a key role as a member of the board of directors in doing that all around the globe. You have John Radcliffe, CIA director. Every single malicious, fabricated lie about China, he will repeat it. So will Mike Waltz, who I think it is confirmed that he will now be the national security advisor. People were saying Trump didn't pick Bolton, he didn't pick Pompeo, he didn't pick Haley. Instead, he picked their ideological clones, which are these people. Mike Waltz is the idea. Tell me, how is he different than John Bolton? How is Marco Rubio different than Mike Pompeo? How is Elias Stefanik different than Nikki Haley, except in name? I mean, some of them actually almost look.
And that Marco Rubio pick is the one that really showed me what the hell is going on. They could have masked it until they picked Marco Rubio. When you pick Marco Rubio, now we like, oh man, what the fuck? Even if he said, well, I'm gonna keep it part of my Florida, what, the Florida Zionist? What the hell are you talking about? But what it looks like is they can play musical chairs all they want, but them small hats is going to keep control of the foreign affairs of the United States of America so they can shake us down, steal all our money, and then send fools like Anthony Blinken, Marco Rubio, even when Hillary Clinton or John Kerry, Mr. Skull and Bones. I was thinking about that yesterday. I'm thinking, hold on. They wrote that Secretary of State is always going to be a war hawk and a Zionist. No matter if Barack, you see when Barack was in there, who did he give it to? He gave it to Hillary Clinton. And what did she do? Kill Gaddafi, try to kill Assad, help out, overthrow the democratically elected president in Ukraine and put the neo-Nazis in power. That's what the Secretary of State can do. While the President Barack Obama sitting there just being a president, Secretary of State can do all kind of nefarious BS all over the fucking world.
Identical in appearance. So there is no change coming. They need to kick the can down the road. They need to create doubts and hesitation in the minds of Americans so that they don't try to actually change anything in the US. And they'll go ahead and they'll advance this agenda. I heard people talk about Vivek Ramaswamy. This guy is an anti-war. He's an anti-China war hawk. I'm sorry, anti-China war hawk. I'm just looking down the list. It's unbelievable. And the problem is, going back to humans being emotional creatures, they would rather become liars themselves than admit that they have been lied to. So as I'm debating with people about this, who try to make excuses, I see them adopting lies that I know they oppose, but they don't want to admit that they've been tricked.
So they
don't want to admit that this hope was an illusion. They rather be shaped into bad people than admit people they thought were good have actually turned out to be very bad. So you will see Trump supporters who picked Trump specifically because he said he would stop wars abroad, repeating lies about China, about Iran, because they don't want to admit that Trump has instantly, at light speed at least, betrayed his campaign promises. And so, yes, it's just going to get worse. And for people who are making excuses or who are trying to convince themselves that this is not exactly what it looks like, especially after 4 years of this already, I honestly don't know what else to say. What I will say, though, is it was a good sign that people overwhelmingly voted for Trump, because that is a rejection of status quo, although Trump is status quo, just repackaged. The other thing that I will say is, if you want to see a change in U.S. American foreign or even domestic policy, it's going to happen because the multipolar world creates an environment in which change in the United States is impossible.
Under his when he was president the first time, and I was studying this shit real tough, I witnessed them try to force that man to go big war. They wanted him to attack Syria, talk about Bashar al-Assad, gas his own people. That was a big lie. Al-Qaeda did it to bring the U.S. in, and Trump refused. They were trying to force that man. They wanted that war. He said, hell no. Barack Obama started that war. Hillary Clinton started the war. Trump got in there, and Trump wanted the oil, which is an imperialist. He didn't want no war. He wanted their oil. And then they trapped him in Iraq. And then tricked them, Pompeo and them, and had him kill General Soleimani, but they was trying to make him go to war with Iran. He refused the big war. Then they said, well, we got to do something to keep the prestige of America, and trapped him into killing Soleimani, a big mistake. But they was mad that Soleimani had defeated ISIS. They want to act like they defeated ISIS. No, they didn't. Soleimani got with Putin and they defeated ISIS. But anyway, so I watched Trump in power. Nobody can tell me shit about that. Take on. That's why the military was mad at him. He took them on. And them is the classified documents that he took. They charged him with, which proved the U.S. military tried to set him up. That's the documents they wanted back. They didn't want him showing people those documents. And he's on record saying the U.S. military, Mark Milley and them, they tried to trick him and make him go to war. He didn't want war. So I know for a fact he's a businessman. He don't want war, but this shit, like the title say, is bigger than him, you know, and he need to and they trapped him with that assassination plot to kill him and his whole damn family if he don't relinquish that foreign power, which he did. He done already relinquished it. He can't, them people gonna do what they want to do. That's a fact.
The type of foreign policy the U.S. wants to pursue abroad will be made impossible by the multipolar world, creating an environment where U.S. wars abroad are no longer possible. There's significant, sufficient military deterrence against U.S.
So we just got to be ready for all hell to break loose, because them people going to play with Putin the wrong way and they're going to get stepped on, or they're going to fuck around and find out with Iran, or they're going to find out Venezuela ain't playing. They ready to die for this shit. That's serious business. It's all losses. Ain't no wins for the U.S. or those Zionists, man.
Wars and
not with a
proxy
war.
wars,
Sanction wars,
securing the information space across the multipolar world, denying the U.S. dominion over it, especially with all these U.S.-based social media platforms, media organizations, putting a check on that and displacing that from the information space around the globe. Things like this. This is what will constrain and stop U.S. foreign policy. I have no hope at all that it will ever change internally in the United States.
Yeah, right. And I think, for me, it's people are going to have to create and demand something much better than a Donald Trump or any kind of alternative in the establishment, or an alternative posing as an alternative in the establishment, because you're not going to get in the duopoly, in the two-party system, which is absolutely controlled by wealth, by capital, by money, by the rich, and by, of course, the military interests and the warmongers that do their bidding. You're not going to get change out of that. And what's so interesting, Brian, I don't know if you caught the enthusiasm that was so apparent on social media after Donald Trump publicly announced he was not going to invite Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo back into his administration. There was almost a kind of gleeful celebration that was going on among those who were following this. But of course, this was very premature, because it almost seems like now that move was just a way to soften the blow of choosing someone possibly like Marco Rubio, who some people have tried to quibble with me. Oh, Marco Rubio versus Mike Pompeo. Oh, who's worse? Maybe Mike Pompeo is a little worse. I'm just like, do you know Marco Rubio? Marco Rubio he is being groomed by the Adelsons, who are the big money donor to Donald Trump, around getting him to be very friendly to Israel. That has been the case for the past two political administrations for Donald Trump. Marco Rubio is being groomed by them to be president, but this guy is connected to everything, whether it is through trying to support and literally supporting every single coup attempt in Latin America, to wanting war with Iran, to, of course, also being a fanatic China hawk, a fanatic. All of these choices so far are fanatics when it comes to China. They are China hawks through and through. Even the Western media calls them China hawks, because that's just what they are. And that's what you can expect. You can expect now. I don't even know if it's going to be a reprioritization, Brian. I don't know, because the Ukraine conflict cannot be left, right? Like, you can't just do nothing about it. You have to do something about it. And it's unclear whether Russia is going to say, well, all right, if you want to ignore this, then we're just going to hold back. No, that politically, it doesn't seem possible for NATO and the United States to necessarily just ignore it. They're going to have to make decisions about it, which means that they're going to have to be involved if these China hawks and these Iran hawks in Trump's upcoming cabinet are going to get their way. They're going to have to do all three fronts, Brian.
I'm not going to play with these people.
Yes, well, this is the problem, and let's just all be honest. The United States holding primacy over the rest of the planet is unrealistic. It is an absolute fantasy detached from reality. It cannot be achieved. And people pursuing a policy like this, they're just going to do increasingly desperate things to achieve something that is unachievable. And when I say desperate, I also mean the more desperate you become, the more dangerous the things you do become. So there is that threat. We're looking at Israel. The one thing that differentiates Israel from Ukraine is that it is supposedly armed with nuclear weapons. If there's a window of opportunity closing to use conventional military means, or maybe the window is already closed against Iran, reassert American primacy over the region, there is this temptation to have Israel use nuclear weapons against Iran, devastate its economic infrastructure, its ballistic missile production, a number of things to just cripple and set Iran back. Maybe not even defeat it, but just set it back enough so the U.S. can reassert control over the region. There is a temptation to do that. And the U.S. can say, well, just like with steamrolling Gaza, we told them to show restraint. They just did whatever they wanted to do, even though the U.S. has enabled every single aspect of everything Israel does. So there's that danger. There's the same danger of someone overplaying their hand in Ukraine and direct conflict erupting between Russia and NATO. And for the United States, its presence in NATO versus Russia is located in Europe. So if missiles start to fly, who's going to suffer? Is it going to be the continental United States? No, it will be Europe. Same goes for Asia Pacific. It'll be South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, and the island province of Taiwan that absorb the full brunt of any conflict that takes place there. So from America's point of view, the ruling elite, the special interests driving these desperate and dangerous foreign policies, they feel decoupled from the consequences of their actions.
Well, they shouldn't feel like that, because I've played the videos over and over with President Putin and his foreign minister Lavrov making it crystal clear your oceans will not protect you this time. It won't be none of that World War II. Russia lose 25 million, China lose 20 million, the U.S. lose 400,000, because they didn't fight no fucking body. But they fought the Japanese, dropped that nuclear bomb on them because they didn't want to do no real fight. But it's not gonna be none of that. Putin already warned them, your oceans will not protect you. You're gonna feel it this time. Your population gonna feel it. But he already said he's not gonna target the civilian areas, but all centers where orders can be given, where leaders is at plotting and planning. He already warned them about that shit. They need to understand this.
Including the most desperate and dangerous actions. That is where the real danger lies here. And you can see people criticize Russia, China, and Iran for their patience and their restraint. But that is because I believe they are well aware of this danger. And they're just trying to time out the clock before
something. That's the craziest part about all of this. Really, really, really. Because when we say Israel got the right to exist, no country has the right to exist. And Rome had the right to exist. You know what I'm saying? Mongolia up under Genghis Khan, they had the right to exist too. All these great kingdoms that we heard about, they all had the right to exist. It was very powerful at one point in time. What happened to those nations? Why were they wiped off the face of the earth? The remnants of them remain. People digging in the ground trying to find out exactly what happened. The arrogance of these individuals. But what we don't understand, because some of us are historically dumb, that the orchestrators of a lot of this confusion is amongst us. You see what I'm saying? These name changes, these identity changes, these people who 1 year, 1 century they named this, the next century they have a totally different name, and then a totally different location. They have no loyalty to any piece of soil. You understand? And that's what Putin understands. See, he understands what he up against. And China, it's some nations, they understand. But the problem we have, those individuals run America. We up under their rule. You know, and like I say, it's so crystal clear where this is all going. It's just crazy, you know, because these people that I'm talking about, they don't have to be here. They can go stay in Iceland, Greenland, you know, the Scandinavian places, blue water, green grass. Oh, it looks so picture perfect. They don't have to be here when the missiles fall. And if it wasn't no America in the capacity that it is right now, the world would be a better place and the world feel like that. We got to understand what we're dealing with.
Something dangerous, desperate, and dangerous is done by the United States. Now, I forget what was the other point you were asking about, Danny.
No, that's okay. Well, I mean, it's good that we're talking about all three of these fronts at the same time, to be honest, Brian, because I think this is where, and we've been trying to draw in this thread throughout the conversation, this is where a lot of people are getting hung up. Just because Donald Trump, for example, says positive things on Ukraine, for example, like I'm going to end it in 24 hours, pretty ridiculous. And the plans, and maybe you want to talk about this too, what he even put out there, what has been rumored to be put out there as a possible settlement, pretty insulting to Russia. Even the rumored phone call we haven't even gotten to, where it was said that, oh, Donald Trump called Vladimir Putin. Dmitry Peskov, Russia's spokesperson, said absolutely not. That did not happen. But even what was supposedly said on that phone call is an insult to Russia. To me, doesn't even signal any progress, because what is reportedly being said, Brian, is that he basically told Putin, you better de-escalate. We need to talk about how to, we need to talk about Europe and how we're going to protect Europe from you, almost. And that just seemed to be what a ridiculous approach to any kind of conversation, and one that didn't even happen. So we have, I think, a lot of, even in the lead up to Trump's new administration, a lot of fog of war, but also just the reality that just because Donald Trump says he's going to close out the Ukraine conflict does not mean that the U.S. foreign policy establishment is not going to get theirs. There's obviously a concerted effort here. And I do believe, and I'm curious in your thoughts on this too, Brian, I do believe a lot of this is in part an attempt to stabilize the situation. Ukraine is a disaster. If it keeps going on in this way, NATO will be a shell of itself. It already is. Ukraine will essentially cease to exist. And the weapon of choice economically for the U.S. and its vassals, sanctions, have already been.
The small has understand that Ukraine is almost finished, done. They tried it. They gave it a hell of a shot. They really tried to play Putin, but it cost them. They have to save Israel. Israel is in serious trouble in the Middle East right now. Any day now, Iran could give them that Operation True Promise 3. Hezbollah giving them the blues over there in southern Lebanon. Hamas still fighting and kicking, refused to surrender. The Iraqi militias still launching drones and missiles. Yemen is crippling the economy in the Red Sea and shooting missiles. There ain't nobody to resist this. Israel is in trouble. You see? They have to save Israel. That they better move all their focus to Israel, because that is their new colony. That's the new. They are killing people like they did our people, like they murdered the indigenous people. That is happening right now in our face. They're trying to wipe them people out. Any resistance, just like any of our people who fought back. I've been telling people right now, if anybody try to fight back for your property, then these Europeans, the same group of cutthroat killers who done the shit here, they're over there doing the same thing. So they got to save that project over there, man. They can't let it in their lifetime say they lost a colony like that. in the Middle East. They've been fighting. See, that ain't nothing new. They've been fighting. It's crusades. Read about it. That's why it's so disgusting that those Arab nations are tapping out like they're tapping out. Because I'm like, God damn. But it ain't always been Arabs who conquered Jerusalem. It's Turks. Saladin the Great was a Turkish war general. That's one of the greatest of the greats. He was Turkish. And right now in your own lifetime, the Persians are giving them the biggest fight. The Iranians. It's not the Turks, who was the Ottoman Empire, you see. But that is the main goal. It's going to be the main focus. It's going to be the Middle East. They going to have to see, they want to fight over there because they already know Putin is about had enough. And he really could cripple Europe. And they old European dynasties, they don't want that.
Been delegitimized. Those can't even last in and of themselves. They're essentially completely defeated in many respects. So there is a need, and of course, Gaza, the Middle East, just an absolute disaster. No victory. There was no victory there before October 7, 2023. This October 7, 2023 only led to a further, in my opinion, just a complete and utter quagmire for the U.S. So I believe that there's some attempts to balance off these fronts through someone like Trump. But I think the big sights here is, okay, if Ukraine has been the big focus, especially monetarily for so long, well, let's now split between Iran and China. If we diminish a bit of what Ukraine is getting, then we should look at Iran and China because, first of all, Israel is in big trouble, and China is the real big enchilada.
Yes. Well, again, as I was pointing out before, even before the election, the U.S. was talking about how their stockpiles are exhausted. There's no more support. Attempts to expand military industrial production to cover the disparity between what is being provided to Ukraine and what the Russian military has available to that has all failed. That never materialized. And so there was always going to be I like what you said, Danny, a stable, they have to stabilize what is happening in Ukraine. They have to somehow freeze the conflict, or at least create some sort of standoff of some kind. Because again, the clock is ticking. Every year, China gets stronger. Every year, Iran is getting stronger. We can see, despite their best efforts, even Russia is getting stronger. The multipolar world, to shift the balance of power from the collective West to the rest of the world, every single year that goes by, that increases. And so they're running out of time, and they're trying to reassert primacy everywhere. And now they're forced to pick and choose. We remember
too late, man. They got kicked out of Africa, bro. If you can't hold Africa, you can't. You got kicked out of Niger. Burkina Faso still holding on. Mali, we're gonna dig back into that in the next couple of days. I ain't looked into that in a while. We got to dig back into those freedom fighting nations. But remember, with the weaponry of the Russians, I told you, it's over for them. Nobody taking that shit anymore. No more leeching and roaching and pillaging and plundering. But the problem is the small hats run these countries, and they're going to make these people fight. They don't give a damn about none of these people's. They don't care, like they've been using our army to topple government. They don't give a damn about our people who died in Vietnam, people died in Iraq, or our veterans killing themselves every day with suicide. People don't give a damn about that. And that's the problem. Like I say, these people got to be humble, man, and I just hate that whatever happened, a lot of people not going to make it through this. It's a lot of, some is. But the humbling is coming. Because like in the Bible, whether you believe it or not, the story of Pharaoh. You see, Pharaoh, his heart had to get hardened, man. The Most High had to harden his heart so he can get the punishment. If he wouldn't have hardened his heart, Pharaoh just would have went along with it and said, yeah, go ahead, go. No. What happened? He hardened his heart. Yeah, so you can get what's coming to you. See, America, the heart has been hardened, man. The Europeans, their heart has been hardened. NATO. So they obviously got to get what's coming.
Remember them saying the United States military has to be ready to fight on 2 or 3 fronts. they're lucky if they can fight on even just one front now. We can see the limits. I also like what you said about Israel and the shift in the balance of power in the Middle East there. That goes back well beyond October 7th. This operation, which I think I have different views on that than many people do, especially considering the history and the role Hamas has played versus Iran, Syria, Russia in the region. But if you followed, say, the 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, Israel's inability to achieve any of its goals there, you could already see a shift taking place. The military superiority that the West enjoyed for so long was already at that time shifting in the other direction, and it has only done more so since. And so this is what they're racing against. This is what they're trying to maybe in a way catch up with, and they just simply can't. And they're so convinced of their inherent superiority, they can't imagine that it's just impossible for them to do this, so they will not give up. And if you listen to a lot of the arguments made by why are we antagonizing China? What did China actually do to the United States? Nothing. All they've done is outcompete and begin surpassing the United States. How is that China's fault? How does that justify confronting China militarily off their own coast on the other side of the planet? You know,
China is not controlled by the small hats, and China won't allow them to indoctrinate their people religiously, like North Korea. Like I think North Korea is something to behold. You can get death row trying to teach any of the three religions to North Koreans, and I can respect that. You know, I can respect the North Koreans saying that any type of deity look like them. So when children in North Korea are born, it's something we will never understand, because we was beaten and shackled and forced to see deities other than that didn't look like us. You know, and that's why Kim Jong-un and the Un family are great leaders and will be remembered forever. Because in North Korea, you got to respect that the creator and the deities in their culture look like them. That's what the West hates so fucking much. They can't believe they can't send in their missionaries. We know about what the missionaries did to our people. You send in the missionaries, then you send in the Marines to protect the missionaries. So it's a scam. But North Koreans don't allow no missionary shit in their country, because they already know you're going to tell their people that the deity, the creator, look like you and not them.
You know, it really just doesn't make any sense unless we're going to look at the truth frankly and see that it is about modern day imperialism and a delusional empire that refuses to give up its grip on power across the globe. And actually, it's nothing new. This is what empires have done all throughout history, and now we're living through this cycle turning over once again.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your
us again.
Revolutionary salute to our brother Vincent Brown for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is way of life. No, I absolutely appreciate the love, family. Salute to you.
And before we come on to events in the Gulf, what do you think of Trump's appointments thus far?
I actually think that people shouldn't have expected anything different. But I'm somewhat encouraged, because I think that the United States is more powerful today than it was last week. and it's not going to be more powerful in 2 months from now from what it is today. What is going to happen is that Trump is going to lead a government, from what we're seeing so far, that is only going to be more divisive inside the United States, and that is going to cause a lot of trouble because the economy is not doing well and it's going to do worse. And because Democrats who have been hypocritically silent about the genocide in Gaza, I'm sure they'll be using Gaza or anything else that they can to hit back at Trump. So he's going to have a lot of trouble at home. And the hypocrisy of the previous administration, people like Jake Sullivan or Netanyahu's lawyer, as they like to call him, Blinken, that hypocrisy is gone. This team is going to, I think, be more easy for people to read across the world. The United States has lost its soft power. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The last year in Gaza, their support for this ongoing Holocaust and now the genocidal attacks in Lebanon, where every day they're slaughtering 50 to 100 women and children, that has exposed them. But I think Trump is particularly bad, and his people are particularly bad at attempting to present the United States in a positive light. So I think this administration, this incoming administration, is going to marginalize the United States more than before, but it's not going to intimidate Iran, which I think is what you're going to be asking next. The Iranians are not going to be intimidated. The Iranians are going to strike back. They are going to punish the Israeli regime. And I have no doubt that although dark days are ahead and dark weeks and perhaps months are ahead, but I have no doubt that ultimately the Israeli regime will be defeated. Look at what Hezbollah has been doing in the last 24 hours. It's amazing. They're punishing the Israeli regime, and the regime is unable to advance in Lebanon. They're on the receiving end of strikes in Tel Aviv, despite the fact that they were supposed to go all the way to the Litani River in Lebanon. They were supposed to be there by now, but they're still stuck on the border. So I think people should not be intimidated by this gang that Trump is bringing to power. The United States is on the decline. If Trump was smart, he would be the anti-war president that he pretended to be, because that's what the United States needs. If it wants to prevent the economic collapse, if it wants to have a future for its people, it has to change course now. It has to shut down many of those military bases across the world, 800 to 900. It has to cut defense spending. It has to end the wars. It has to bring about stability in West Asia. But from what we're seeing, Trump does not seem to want that. And if he does want to do that, he will probably not be able to do that. Let me give you an interesting story, which it would be useful to your listeners. After Trump went to North Korea, a senior North Korean official met a senior Iranian official. And that official told me in a small gathering that he, out of curiosity, said, what was Trump like? Because you alluded to this in your introduction when you were talking about if Trump thinks he's smarter than them all. That official said that when Trump came and spoke, everything was fine. But as soon as he left the room and the negotiators began, and the national security advisor took charge, everything fell apart. In other words, the discussion was pleasantries, and there were nothing happened while Trump was meeting the North Korean leader. But as soon as the meeting between the two ended and the people who had to do the negotiations began to do their work, it was the same business as usual. It was sabotaged, and the whole thing fell apart. So let's pretend that Trump brings in all these horrible people in order to control them. Well, he didn't succeed last time round, and there's no reason to believe that he is going to succeed this time round. But I personally don't believe that that's really the case. I think he's very deeply influenced by the Zionist lobby, and they got what they want, just as they got what they wanted in previous administrations. But as I said, I think this administration doesn't even pretend to have a mask, and that is a good thing.
Yes, and the point you make about Trump's lack of soft power around the world, I mean, that I can testify from my own mailbag. It was perceived that I wanted Trump to win, and it was a very unpopular stand to take. People in Europe, people in the Western world in general, people on the Democratic side, 68, 9, 70 million of those, they'll all be gunning for Trump. And the turn that he's made, this warmongering turn that he's made, even if he thinks he can trump it with his own personality, is going to run into quite a lot of trouble. Now, going to the Middle East first as a whole in the Levant, the situation, as you just described it, is that the Lebanese resistance have fought the Israeli occupation force to a standstill. It is the case that they do not control a single village in Lebanon after what? 50 days of all-out war, when their war aim was to drive the resistance all the way north past the Litani River. And even in Gaza, which they have completely flattened, and where they are starving, willfully starving to death,
fighting Iran,
hundreds of thousands of people, they're still losing soldiers there. They're still unable to pacify the territory that they have complete control of now. And so, help me on this. How can they imagine that on top of those two situations, they can fight the Islamic Republic of Iran? That just makes no sense to me.
Well, before I answer that, I'd like to also point out that, and I'm sure that some of your viewers will not be happy with what I'm about to say, but I would not vote for Trump under any circumstances, but I don't see any reason why anyone could possibly vote for Harris. Voting for Harris means, and if she it means that you're trying to help her get into office. Her getting into office means a type of, and that would not be the intention, but Harris and the corporate media and the establishment would present it as a vindication that a year of Holocaust was the right thing to do, and Americans accept it. So I think Harris had to go. I think Biden had to go, and it's tragic that the regime in Washington gives people a choice between Trump and Harris, and it just shows that there's no democracy in the United States. But I don't think that voting for Harris would have been a good thing at all, because they had to be punished for what they did. And of course their punishment after they die, I think, will be infinitely worse, but I think they deserve this punishment. But with regards to Israel, yes, they've lost in Gaza. This is the Israeli regime that would go all the way to the Suez Canal. Now they can't take Gaza after well over a year, despite the genocide. And in Lebanon now, they're killing between 50, as I said, to 100 civilians a day. And the difference between Lebanon and Gaza is that Lebanon is full of Western embassies. Beirut is full of embassies. They all see it. They know it. There are Western journalists based there. They see it happen. They call these Hezbollah targets because they want to hide the truth that they're just targeting women and children. They're slaughtering women and children because they are part of a community that's supportive of the resistance. And these embassies and these Western journalists are all are part of this conspiracy. And Hezbollah also, while fighting against this Israeli regime onslaught, has a problem that's even more, that makes it more difficult than for Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And that is that they have enemies in Beirut who are conspiring against them with Western embassies as these genocidal attacks are being carried out. The same people who carried out the massacre in Sabra and Shatila, the camp, the Palestinian refugee camp, which killed 3,500 Palestinians and Shias in that camp. The same people are now having meetings with Western embassies to carry out a coup in Lebanon. Of course, they're going to fail. And but it just shows how disgusting the West is, who their allies are, and how Western media is trying to hide the reality of these genocidal strikes in Lebanon. So Hezbollah has to be careful of what's happening behind it, but it is quite astounding how they are defeating the Israeli regime. It is extraordinary what these young men are doing on the battlefield, and how the Israelis have failed to make any inroads. They only come in during the day, go in a kilometer or two, blow up people's homes, and do what they did in Gaza, take pictures of themselves wearing women's clothes, and then they retreat at night. And they get beaten and hammered and humiliated, and they've achieved nothing. So how is the Israeli regime, which cannot cross the Lebanese border, how is the Israeli regime that has failed in Gaza and it has only carried out a genocide, how does it think it's going to defeat Iran? The hope of the regime is not that it can defeat Iran, because Iran can crush it. The hope of the regime is to draw in the Americans. And of course, the Trump cabinet makes it seem that that is what the Americans would possibly do. But personally, I think it's quite clear for the sane but sinister people in Washington. Not everyone is sane, but those who are sane and sinister, that an American attack on Iran will result in utter devastation throughout the Persian Gulf region. All those bases will be destroyed. But far more important than the bases is the fact that those tiny dictatorships across the Persian Gulf, they will no longer exist. There will be no more oil and no more gas, either in the Persian Gulf. American bases in Iraq will be overrun, and in the Caucasus, there will be no oil either. So if Trump wants to destroy the U.S. economy, that's the choice that he can take. But I think that his supporters will very, very swiftly turn against him, and it will destabilize the United States. And if they're worried about refugees and illegal immigrants now, imagine what it will be like for Europe and the United States if there's an economic collapse, a global economic collapse. It's a very scary scenario. No one will win. The world will lose. It will affect people for decades to come, everyone across the world. But it will be a major catastrophe for Trump and his people too.
Now, they say in the US that Iran is trying to kill Trump. I don't know whether to laugh or cry at the information that they have so far released. An Iranian American and 2 New York Jewish Americans. It doesn't seem to add up to a conspiracy led by the Ayatollahs in Tehran to me. How seriously should we treat this?
Well, George, I think the timing is key. The story doesn't add up, and it is ridiculous. But why is it that right after Trump is elected president, this comes out? And of course, we know that elements within the deep state tried to murder Trump. Probably the same people are giving out this sort of disinformation. But more importantly, I think, is the timing. Why is it that after he was chosen that they chose to declare this? And why is it that at the same time, the United States government has been saying that they will swiftly send all the assistance that Congress has passed for Ukraine to Kiev. Because regardless of what Trump wants, and regardless of what his intentions are, and regardless of the gangsters that are surrounding him right now, what they want, I think that the deep state, the current regime in Washington, they want to intensify tensions with Russia and with Iran to ensure that Trump will fail. Because the United States is so deeply divided that these people would rather have the United States fail under Trump than to succeed under Trump. And of course, I think Trump will fail anyway. I think the United States is destined to fail, whether with Trump or without. And I think Trump is worse for the United States than anyone else for the reasons that I explained earlier. But I think that these two things are connected. The accusations, the ridiculous accusations against Iran, and the swift move to quickly give Ukraine all that they can before a change in government.
Footage shows a major Israeli strike near Beirut International Airport, in the southern part of the Lebanese capital, this afternoon on Thursday at 1:17 p.m. Footage shared by Lebanese media shows a powerful airstrike on the civilian residential area of Marejeh, just meters away across the airport, where a passenger plane is seen taxiing in the background and preparing to take off nearby. Although details are scarce, the strike is a dangerous move for the safety of civil aviation and passengers, considered a war crime in its quality and scale. So far, Beirut Airport, the country's only airport, has reportedly remained open despite the strike, well behind the battle lines to put pressure on Hezbollah. The reported bombing comes amid ongoing tensions, in which Israeli military action has targeted various locations in Lebanon, often as a pretext for hostilities involving Hezbollah or other groups. On the North Front, Israeli military appears to be struggling to gain a foothold, as it continues to attempt to break into southern Lebanon, but is met with fierce resistance from Hezbollah troops. Hezbollah continues to take important and strategic steps by targeting enemy military personnel and their equipment, which poses a significant threat to Lebanon's sovereignty. In addition to crippling dozens of Israeli soldiers in the past 72 hours, Hezbollah has the upper hand on the North Front, having so far destroyed 43 Merkava tanks by ATGM since the start of Israeli ground invasion. Meanwhile, the new defense minister sat down with Israeli military staff Herzi Halevi, announcing the goal of the war on the North Front is to disarm Hezbollah. Katz vowed that IDF will continue fighting until all Israeli goals are achieved. However, it appears that Hezbollah has begun the second phase of its operations as troops and tanks advance towards Lebanon's north lines.
to the right. So Iran have made an offer to the UN that they can't refuse, in my view. And this, I fancy, is no coincidence either, given the election of Donald Trump in the US and the frankly insane line of pro-Israel war hawks he's been putting into his administration when he takes power again in January. Iran has been playing a clever game, in my view, with the West, especially given social media has enabled Iran's messaging to bypass the bias of Western mainstream media. So no longer are as many people being sucked in by claims that Iran is a militaristic bogeyman here. That impression has been reinforced by Israel clearly attacking them now on 3 occasions as the world awaits Iran's response to their latest strike. They were in no rush to retaliate last time. They don't seem to be this time either. But it is not in relation to that expected retaliation that Iran seems to be boxing clever over on this occasion, though. Instead, it relates to their nuclear program. For so long, this has been the greatest source of fear with regards to Iran in the West. Are they building nuclear weapons, or are they simply investing in nuclear power? Israel, for one, has loudly and for a long time warned of Iran's nuclear threat. So for Iran to go to the UN now, looking to negotiate with their nuclear watchdog, is unprecedented. But there's a catch. Right, so Iran's nuclear research, they're in talks with the UN showing willingness and cooperation to negotiate compliance with nuclear safeguards at all of their nuclear research sites. That's quite an offer to the West, isn't it? Iran have always been reluctant, cagey, unwilling to let the UN, ostensibly seen as far too much of a vehicle for Western powers, to inspect what they are doing by way of nuclear research. And it certainly hasn't been enough for Western leaders, anti-Iran as they mostly are anyway, to simply accept the word of the Iranian Ayatollah that no research into nuclear weapons has been undertaken, despite a fatwa, which is a religious legal ruling, if you like, dating back to the 1990s, issued by the Ayatollah, which expressly banned the research or acquisition of nuclear weapons by Iran. Fatwas effectively being the equivalent of swearing on the Bible, I suppose is the best way of looking at it. Obviously no presence in actual law, so it's non-binding. However, a willingness to now let the UN in, perhaps, well, you can't imagine them ever doing that if they genuinely have nukes or were looking into actually making them, especially given Iran's nuclear sites are already known. Israel was planning on targeting them last time they were planning a strike on Iran, after all, until apparently talked down by the US. That segues nicely onto my next point about why this is rather a clever move by Iran. They're being reasonable. They're offering openness and transparency here. Come in, have a look around. Check our safeguarding of our nuclear research. See that it is in the interest of energy security and not weaponry, just like we said. And then when Israel threatened to attack them again after we retaliate for their last attack on us, as is virtually certain, you will know there are no nuclear weapons here, and you will know exactly what they will have targeted or threatened to target if you don't stop them. Well, that might be getting a bit ahead of ourselves, actually, a bit. This is a negotiation to get to that point, though. There is years of mistrust on both sides to overcome. But as I said at the start, I think the timing of this is telling with Trump's return in a matter of weeks to the White House. Trump is basically Benjamin Netanyahu's bestie. They were hoping he would win, and he has. And with a horrifying array of pro-Israel maniacs being lined up for key jobs in the next US administration, it's not looking great. So as much as this is about getting Israel to back off by negotiating for their nuclear sites to potentially be checked and verified by the UN, it's also about making sure Trump can't make claims that Iran are investing in nuclear armaments if the UN clearly know otherwise. This is the catch, though. Iran is willing to negotiate with the UN and their atomic watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, as long as they are not entering into negotiations whereby they will come under pressure and intimidation. The ball on that score, according to Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, is in the ball of the EU/E3, as he put it. The 3 nations being pointed to by him being the UK, France, and Germany. The UK and German governments are rabidly pro-Israel and anti-Iran. France backing off a bit from its formerly vociferous Israeli support, but still certainly anti-Iran. Perhaps no surprise then that Araghchi singled them out here. But it is Trump's return to power imminently that is clearly the main issue, though, especially when it comes to those claims of being put under pressure or intimidation, because this is exactly what Trump did last time he was in power, and Iran flipped him the bird over it. Iran have been enriching uranium for domestic use, for use as an energy source. That has always been their claim, at least. The IAEA estimate they've enriched uranium up to levels of around 60%, and 90% is apparently needed for a nuclear weapon. So they aren't there yet, the fatwa in place ostensibly prohibits them from reaching that level, not needed for energy purposes. However, 60% is far higher than needed for energy purposes as well. So you wonder why Iran have taken research that far, with intent or just to wind the West up. Well, being able to ask them about that would be a good start, wouldn't it? Trump may be one explanation for that, however, because the 2015 nuclear accord between Iran and various other world powers to curb Iran's nuclear research was pulled out of by Trump back in 2018, because the big orange idiot preferred to just dump pressure on Iran, which led them to violate the agreement on enrichment. So hitting 60% is possibly entirely on Trump, but I haven't found a date for when they reached that to make that claim definitively. Therefore, Iran expressing willingness to negotiate with the IAEA and with the UN on its nuclear research is a big step still, not only because Iran doesn't trust the West, doesn't really trust the IAEA, and for that reason expectation is still low regarding any progress. But Iran opened the door here. They're opening the door to some progress. Whether successful or not reflects more positively on them than anyone else, though. And if talks fail, then they can perhaps hang that on the UN. But I suggest it's in Iran's interest to try and make this work. Certainly the IAEA's chief, Rafael Grossi, wants to see some progress here, so it's no good him coming in too heavy-handed either, as this excerpt from Al Arabiya implies. Relations between Tehran and the IAEA have soured over several long-standing issues, including Iran barring the agency's uranium enrichment experts from the country and its failure to explain uranium traces found at undeclared sites. In August, the agency said Iran's production of highly enriched uranium continues, and it has not improved cooperation with it despite a resolution passed by the IAEA Board of Governors in June. Grossi, who has long sought progress with Tehran over its fast advancing nuclear work, said inspections are just one chapter of our cooperation and cannot be discussed. Iran's nuclear chief Mohammad Islami said his meeting with Grossi was constructive, but he warned that Tehran would react immediately to any resolution against it at an IAEA meeting next week, without elaborating. A senior Iranian official told Reuters on Wednesday that Tehran's reaction to a resolution could be to limit diplomatic and technical cooperation with the IAEA. It's a delicate situation. So the last thing anyone wants is Donald Trump getting involved then. So a small window of opportunity between now and January, opened by Iran, could lead to big things. Could see off nonsense claims by Israel or Trump's administration. Would, if successful, really help Iran insofar as claims of self-defense go going forwards. But a failure to reach agreement would, I think, hurt Iran more going forward. So I really hope this is a situation that can be resolved, and that ensures nuclear facilities can never be claimed, whether honestly or dishonestly, as legitimate targets. It's not the first smart diplomatic move we've seen from Iran where it comes to the United States either. A diplomatic move from them just the other week put Genocide Joe between a rock and a hard place, and it was absolutely genius how it panned out. Check out the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch.
On the morning of November 14th, war correspondents reported sensational news that shocked not only the Ukrainian general staff, but also their so-called NATO military advisors. In particular, a number of reputable Russian war correspondents stated that on November 14th, at 6 a.m. Moscow time, two armored groups of the Russian army made a lightning-speed forced march from settlements Sinkovka and Lyman-Pervy to the northeastern part of Kupiansk. Later, this information was also confirmed by numerous Ukrainian telegram channels. According to them, on the morning of November 14th, Russian paratroopers invaded Zayovsky microdistrict in the eastern part of Kupiansk and have already occupied a significant part of this territory. Commenting on the breakthrough of the Russian army in Kupiansk direction of the front, war correspondents noted that the actions of the Russian troops were so rapid and unexpected that one of the units of the Ukrainian army was trapped near the railway station between Zayovsky microdistrict and the settlement of Petropavlovsk, where several units of Russian army are also located. Moreover, the Ukrainian army units in the village of Kucherovka also found themselves trapped between Zayovsky microdistrict and Petropavlovsk. Now, these units of the Ukrainian army are forced not only to restrain Russian troops' offensive from Petropavlovsk, but also to defend their backs, fearing a blow from Russian paratroopers from Zayovsky microdistrict. Numerous Ukrainian resources also confirmed this information. According to them, due to the actions of Russian troops, the garrison of the Ukrainian army in this direction of the front was literally cut into two parts. Thus, now the Ukrainian High Military Command faces a dilemma: to continue fighting to the last Ukrainian soldier, trying to regain lost positions, or, before it is too late, withdraw troops to the right bank of the Oskol River, and thereby save the lives of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and officers. Moreover, the seizure of a part of Zayovsky microdistrict by Russian paratroopers also allowed the Russian army to take under fire control the entire road leading to the settlement of Kupiansk-Kozlovoy. In this regard, the Ukrainian army garrison located in this village found itself in a very difficult situation. The fact is that the main task of this Ukrainian garrison in the settlement of Kupiansk-Kozlovoy was to deter the offensive of Russian troops from the south and southeast directions. And now, after the Russian army captured part of Zayovsky microdistrict, the Ukrainian army garrison in Kupiansk-Kozlovoy had to rebuild its positions, as Russian troops came close to its left flank and began firing at Ukrainian soldiers from the north. Meanwhile, the authoritative Russian telegram channel, the Diary of a Paratrooper, told the details of the Russian army's breakthrough in the Kupiansk direction of the front. According to this TG channel, on the morning of November 14th, combat crews of TOS-2 heavy flamethrower systems, also known as Tasachka, delivered a powerful blow to the positions of Ukrainian troops, northeast of Kupiansk. As a result, these heavy flamethrower systems created a corridor, through which the Russian army's assault groups broke through to the eastern part of the city of Kupiansk, and entered Zayovsky microdistrict. Given the fact that the advance of Russian soldiers of the group of troops under the designation Zapad is still continuing from Sinkovka towards Petropavlovsk, as well as the recent liberation of such settlements as Kolesnikovka and Kruglyakhovka, very powerful pincers are forming in the Kupiansk direction that literally grabbed the Ukrainian army by the throat. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the Ukrainian High Military Command tried to regain lost positions not only to the northeast of Kupiansk, but also to the southeast of this city. In particular, retired Lieutenant Colonel of the People's Militia of the Luhansk People's Republic, Andrei Marachko, said that on the evening of November 14th, the Ukrainian High Military Command, with the help of forces of an incomplete company tactical group, conducted counterattacking actions in the direction of the settlement of Kolesnikovka, in order to return this village to the Ukrainian army control. However, this operation began to collapse even at the initial stage, and 2 hours after its start, this Ukrainian army's operation was roundly defeated. Commenting on the Russian army's success in the Kupiansk direction of the front, Western military experts and analysts from numerous American and European think tanks said that the Russian troops were advancing on the city of Kupiansk on a wide front. In particular, Western analytical centers have admitted that over the past 24 hours, the Russian army has significantly advanced towards the settlement of Moskovka, and to the west and east of the settlement of Kruglyukovka. Given the complexity of the terrain and the powerful fortified areas of the Ukrainian army in these directions, this achievement is significant for Russian troops. Moreover, analyzing what is happening on the battlefield, an authoritative military expert Boris Razin said that all statements by the Ukrainian General Staff that the Ukrainian army is allegedly experiencing a shortage of ammunition do not correspond to reality. According to him, such statements are pure propaganda and are intended to justify the Ukrainian army's numerous defeats on the battlefield. Meanwhile, after the Russian army's breakthrough in the Kupiansk direction of the front, Ukrainian counterintelligence detained several Ukrainian army generals. According to insiders in Kiev, these generals are suspected of passing secret data to the Russian military, as a result of which the Russian army managed to identify the most vulnerable places of the Ukrainian troops in the Kupiansk direction of the front. In addition, ardent Ukrainian nationalists also called on the Security Service of Ukraine to detain the entire command of the 11th Motorized Rifle Brigade of the Ukrainian Army, which was unable to stop the enemy and allowed Russian troops to enter the eastern part of Kupiansk. Several Ukrainian generals, who fled to Russia with their families, also added oil to the fire. In particular, the authoritative Ukrainian publication Kondotiero, citing its sources in the Ukrainian General Staff, stated that several Ukrainian generals, who were supporters of the dismissed Commander-in-Chief Valery Zaluzhny, fled to Russia with their families. At the same time, it is reported that these high-ranking Ukrainian officers also took a large number of secret documents with them. As a result, the Ukrainian army suffered significant damage. By the way, many Ukrainian experts attribute the Russian army's success in the Kupiansk direction to the fact that a fairly large amount of secret documentation of the Ukrainian General Staff turned out to be in the hands of the Russian military.
This is only the beginning. More generals don't leave. It won't take long enough.
Professor at the University of Tehran, Michael Malouf, a former senior Pentagon security policy analyst, and Ahmed Mustafa, director of the Asia Center for Studies and Translation. Gentlemen, we have the big guns out, and thank you so much for joining us here today on RT. Ahmed, if I may start with you, interestingly, we heard a top NATO official there saying the bloc isn't fighting against Russia, supposedly because they're afraid of Moscow's nuclear arsenal. But aren't they already directly involved in this conflict? I mean, what do you make of this rhetoric?
I think it's something funny because first, legally, Ukraine is not a member of the NATO. Therefore, how can they do it? I don't know exactly the process. Number two, it's very funny because, now there is a change of the president. And as we know that there is some sort of affair between Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin. And I was one who expected from the very beginning that the NATO will be, beaten by Russia. And I expected that from day one. Because what I knew, as I was a scholar at the Harvard School of Economics, is a lot about such issues. Number three, also from where to get or to give the money. And we know, and we heard recently that already the regime in Germany is collapsing because Olaf Scholz wants to give more money to Ukraine and to Israel. And now the taxpayers in Germany, the biggest economy in Europe, they're having a recession. From where they do that, it is only something that the current regime of the Democrats, headed by Biden and the United States, wants just to do something after the fail and after the big defeat before the Republicans in the United States. But they cannot do that. Frankly speaking, it is like a tornado in a cup of coffee.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. All right, Michael, let's take another look. Michael, you know, Western politicians have accused Russia of posing a nuclear threat against their countries. But now there's a top NATO official admitting that it's Moscow's nukes that have prevented an escalation of the conflict. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think nuclear weapons have always been a deterrence. However, this is the age of proxy wars. And the United States has always sought not to be directly involved because, frankly, it knows it will lose a war. It lost in Iraq, it lost in Afghanistan. And to put boots on the ground against Russia, which has an incredible military, plus it has nuclear weapons, I think the sum of all of that made it such that they wanted to work more through their proxies to contain Russia, but not necessarily to go to war against it. And so the whole idea has been to box in Russia. And in doing that, the United States basically pushed Russia in closer alliance with China and now with Iran as a result of our support for Israel. So this is our own policies. We are working against the United States in every direction, rather than trying to work with these countries and trying to come up with reasonable solutions. That's why you see the rise of BRICS on the economic front. On the military front, the United States has clearly shown that it cannot fight a one-front war, let alone a three-front war. So you're not going to be seeing direct military involvement of the United States. And in fact, even the Biden administration concedes that the United States and NATO will not be actively involved in sending troops into Ukraine.
Yeah, indeed. I wonder if we could perhaps, Mohammed, talk a little bit about Iran. You know, Iranian officials have also been talking about the potential of their country to either obtain or to develop nuclear weapons because, you know, with Israel's war, you know, sort of waging a war against its allies. But how would you predict the future of that? I mean, we know that there was some negotiations for Iran to end, you know, to talk about the nuclear deal, but will Iran move forward and perhaps develop its own nuclear weapons?
It seems like this senior NATO official is trying to convince Iranians to develop a nuclear weapon, because basically what he's saying is that if there were no nuclear weapons, we would have invaded. We would have joined the fight, and according to his narrative, they would have defeated the Russians, which I find unlikely with or without nuclear weapons, because the military-industrial complex in the United States is so corrupt that I don't see them being able to wage a war with the Russians and defeat the Russians. But that aside, what he is saying is that if you want to be protected and to prevent the Americans and the Europeans and NATO from attacking you, you have to have nuclear weapons. And that would even be more important if it's a country that's smaller than Russia, because Russia is very large. It has more resources. The smaller countries become, the less resources they have. Thus, North Korea right now is preventing the West from attacking it because of nuclear weapons. So it's very strange that he would make this argument. The Iranians could develop a nuclear weapon very easily. They've had the ability to create a nuclear weapon many years ago. And Iran is one of the top 10 countries when it comes to nuclear technology. So they could do it quite quickly. But Iran doesn't want a nuclear weapon unless it's forced to have one. And the reason why it doesn't want one is because it only encourages other countries to develop nuclear weapons, and it makes the world increasingly unsafe. But if Iran's existence is threatened, then they've said that they will change policy.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I remember when we were talking about the START initiative, and here we are talking about the complete opposite. But we'll get to that in a second. Ahmed, if I may turn to you, how does NATO's nuclear stance affect its relations with countries outside the alliance?
They will try just to, because as you mentioned from the very beginning, it is like a proxy war. Therefore, it was a big mistake just to erupt Ukraine to wage a war against Russia. They wanted to exhaust Russia to the maximum. This is the case, in fact. Not only that, maybe they can, for example, also invoke some countries like Israel, for example, just to push Iran to do the same in the future. However, if we can make a comparison between the two battlefields, I think Iran, it doesn't want any nuclear weapons because they have these ballistic missiles. And those ballistic missiles, I think they were very, very efficient and positive in two attacks on the Zionist entity, Israel. Whether in April and the last one, the 1st of October. And they achieved what they want. And they made the weapons of the United States, and here we talk about the Iron Shield or the Iron Dome, like the ice cream. Therefore, is Iran in this regard, or Russia in this regard, they don't need, because they have Alexander, and they have Fatah, and they have whatsoever from the ballistic weapons, the ballistic missile that can reach the targets they want worldwide. And one of them, I think I remember that in the Indian Ocean, about 5 months before, Iran attacked some Israeli warships or vessels in the Indian Ocean with a distance of more than 2,000 miles. Therefore, this issue, I think it's a kind of waiting whether we need or we don't need, because now I think the American weapons and the American arms not efficient comparing to the Russian or the Chinese or the Iranian weapons in that respect. Therefore, in my view, the matter of using the nuclear weapon, whether via Iran or via Russia, it's disqualified because they have alternatives are more impressive than the ordinary nuclear weapons, in my viewpoint.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Michael, if I may turn to you, you know, Vladimir Putin has said Russia's nuclear arsenal is, in fact, a guarantor for its national security. Do you think he was right in sort of strengthening his nuclear doctrine there, or was it unnecessary?
No, it is a strength. It is a deterrence. And a country as large as Russia, with nuclear weapons and with the conventional forces that it has, is quite formidable. That's why you're not seeing the United States rushing to push military, direct military involvement in Ukraine and elsewhere. And I would also add to what Mohammed had to say about Iran. It is a nuclear threshold state. It has an industrial base and capability to make a nuclear weapon if it wants it. Can it put it onto a miniaturized to put onto a missile? That's another matter. However, North Korea has demonstrated that if you have the nuclear weapons and people and you have South Korea, for example, having war games every other day with the United States just south of you, which is a provocation. That is a provocation, and having those nukes really suggests that they will only go so far. They will not push and invade as the United States did, let's say in Iraq or in Afghanistan. So having that deterrence is useful to that extent. But again, I just don't see the United States cannot wage even a one-front war right now, and I don't see it happening. And this military that we have has got to be cleaned out. It's got to be restructured because of the wokeness that has occurred, and because we've got to get over this hegemony, fighting endless wars. It's cost us $9 trillion just between
just between Iraq and Afghanistan, and this other one is mounting all the time, and it's got to stop. And the American people said enough.
Yeah, well, we'll get to the money in a second. Said Mohammed, you know, why does the West continue to play with fire by arming Kiev with weapons if it truly fears a nuclear threat?
I think it's very emotional. I think to a large degree it's about the US-led empire collapsing. But the people who are in the bubble in Washington, in Brussels, and elsewhere, they still live in the past. And for them, it's very hard to tolerate this new situation where countries are standing up to the United States, countries are saying no to the United States. The hatred for Iran is basically because Iran says, we don't want American domination or American hegemony. And now it is very different. In the past, Iran was alone. Now we see the global South moving towards one another, the creation of BRICS, the creation of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the rise of Asia, especially China. Economically speaking, Russia today is much stronger than before. But I think these Western leaders are, and elites and journalists and all those who are part of this segment of Western society, it's very difficult for them to tolerate this new situation. They feel that they own the earth and that they're losing that ownership, and it's very painful for them, and it creates rage.
You know, actually, that's where I'd like to take our conversation next. Maybe I'll start with Ahmed first. Ahmed, what happened to dialogue? What happened to diplomacy? What happened to, sitting at a table and working out your differences? What's this sort of, bravado of banging on the chest, I have the biggest nuclear weapon? Why is the world turned to this?
Unfortunately, the atrocity and the hegemony, as my colleagues said before, it is the main reason. And also, I don't want to trivialize the time being, changes, as Mr. Mohammed Muradi said, and as Mr. Malouf said, because now the world is changing. And as I was one of the people who said that before, now we have the Global South, we have BRICS, we have SCO, and we have the PRI, and we have ASEAN, and we have the Latin America. Therefore, they don't realize that the world is already changed 5 or 10 years before. This is the whims that still, the topic, in addition to the election of some idiot and fanatic people in the administration via the powerful families or the elites or the transnational companies, like what we see in France, in Germany, in Britain, in America. It is the reason of the collapse of the West. And I said that several times before. And we have a very, very time-being, example. It's Germany, what's happening to Olaf Scholz now. Therefore, if they have, and in my view, I have like initiative, I said it before, the East and West economic dialogue. I think this is the right dialogue to be handled at this time being, because without such kind of economic dialogue, nothing will be solved, because the West, I think, is very close to a catastrophe. A catastrophe, especially in recession. Once America now is reaching about 40 trillion US dollar indebtedness via Bank of America and via the Federal Reserve. And the media in America giving like camouflage and a distortion for the people, and giving different and contradicted reports about the current situation, whether in America and in the West, that following the United States or Washington consensus. Therefore, the time being is very crucial for having this economic dialogue between East and West economic dialogue, in my viewpoint.
Yeah, indeed. We always hear this sort of response to East versus West, North versus South, hegemony. I mean, all these sort of buzzwords. Michael, if I may turn to you, we heard from my other guests here talking about BRICS, the SCO, these sort of formations of alliances. Could they turn military?
Well, the SCO seems to be emerging into more of a defense alliance, but I think it's primarily going to remain economic. Certainly BRICS is. It's setting up the structure. It's going to take time for it to set up the structure. But the reality with SCO and BRICS is that this is the creation now and the implementation of a multipolar world order, getting away from the US-led unipolar world order. And it's going to take time, but it's consequential. And already you see the Biden administration has had no response to the rise of BRICS. I think Trump may, because he wants to deal more on an economic plane. And by doing that, by being much more inclusive on the economic sphere, absent sanctions all the time and secondary sanctions, I think that could lessen the desire for war and do more on a competitive economic scale. That's where I think the direction should go. Now, the rise of the developing countries now have a platform through BRICS and SCO that they don't have in the Western institutions. And as Vladimir Putin said in Kazan recently, BRICS is not anti-Western, it's just non-Western. And so they're giving them an alternative. And so I would like to see that rather than us, the United States in particular, always meeting obstacles with military demands, that we look at things through an economic prism instead.
Indeed. Mohammed, we only have about a minute left, sadly. Do you want to add, do you think the end of this nuclear talk will ever, come to an end? Will we always be talking about nuclear weapons? About a minute, sir.
It's difficult to say, and I think your two other guests have made a very good argument with regards to the current situation and where things are heading, and therefore it's, I think, based upon what we're hearing, it's almost impossible to predict the near future. I think that the days, months, and weeks and months ahead are going to be pretty dark. What we see a genocide in Gaza, we see the war in Ukraine. However, I think we have to remain optimistic. Most people across the world are marginalizing the West because they don't want war. BRICS is non-military. And hopefully the West, as it declines, you'll have more ordinary people pushing the regimes towards a less militaristic approach and towards economic cooperation.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to have to thank you there. Saeed Mohammed Marandi, professor at the University of Tehran, Michael Malouf, former senior.
You see, this is what the U.S. media is supposed to be talking about. One of the most powerful men in the world, President Xi, in Peru, inaugurating a port that would rival U.S. hegemony in Latin America. See, they're not talking about this on the news. They don't want to write it. Chinese president don't leave China office or the deal if he's in Peru. Okay, now what exactly are they doing in Peru? I just want to put this into our very useful information because this is part of the first plan to end the U.S. security.
He's the director of the Center for Asian Studies at San Marcos University, and he joins us from Lima. Let's talk about this mega port built with China's help in Peru. Talk about how it will reshape trade in the Asia Pacific.
Yes, from some years ago, already 50% of export from Peru and from Chile go to Asia, and also increasingly export from Ecuador, Colombia, and even some other Latin American countries go to Asia. But up to now, there is no direct link.
See, the U.S. building military bases. China is building ports.
Between South America and China, our cargo have to go on ships through Mexican ports or United States ports and then go directly to the Pacific. Now, with the Shanghai port, that is a big port, it will allow biggest cargo ships to come directly from China or going directly for China. What does it mean that? It will be a shorter time. It will be cheaper to export goods from Peru and from other countries in South America. That will increase our export. Of course, we will be able to buy also more goods from China. But not only that, goods that are not yet exported because it's very expensive, it will become cheaper because the direct link will allow at least to shave 10 days off of the time that is needed.
Wow.
So it is
a lot quicker, a lot more efficient. Carlos, what about
That's why they're not talking about this. It's gonna cripple. I know Donald Trump probably blow this port up 10 days quicker. They can get the goods from South America to Asia. Oh, the U.S. is sick. That's why they're not talking about this. I stumbled across this. I said, oh, we got to talk about this.
In terms of employment and job creation?
Well, that is the big issue that everybody expects to have already effect with the port. You know, first, bigger cargo, bigger export, bigger import, the people who handle it will get job. But not only that, you know, what I have said is what we call a static effect. But can you imagine the dynamic effect? We're going to have a special economic zone in Shanghai. We are going to or expect to have more industries for exporting to China. For example, in the special economic zone of Shanghai, we expect to have Chinese companies that come here to invest in the manufacturing sector, and that will also allow more employment, not only of more trade, but also of more investment, of also more manufacturing sector. And if cargo, in fact, is coming more from Brazil directly through Shanghai to China and Asia, of course, the benefit of employment will be more. And there will be more investment because we are going to build railroads, we're going to build highways to take full advantage of the Shanghai port.
So we've got investments in Chile, Peru, Ecuador, also powerhouse Brazil. Carlos, talk to me how the Western world, how is all this being viewed in the Western world? I mean, in terms of China's growing influence in the region.
Well, you know, traditionally Latin America has been a place, we are in the same continent as the United States, so it was natural for the United States to be, up to some years ago, our biggest trade partner, our biggest investor. But United States have dedicated to other things. They have put less priority to Latin American region. They have been investing less. So other countries than the United States, like China, is investing more. So they see with suspicion China increasing presence. But we said Latin America is open to business. We will call China as we will welcome Europe, or we will call Japan. So we don't necessarily prefer China. So if United States complain about Chinese investment, is because they don't invest in Peru. We welcome investment from any country. So we're happy with China. We want to increase more goods to China. We want to have more investment from China. But for that matter, from any country, we're open to business. We don't prefer any country in particular. And if United States want to get involving in the region, we welcome that.
All right, we'll leave it on that diplomatic answer, Carlos.
With Scott Ritter, if I can ever doing a lot of interviews in the Baltimore area. I was a law enforcement official for the state of Maryland, right? And once they get he's law enforcement official, and they even got the thing that goes under your name, and that's all I would get asked about. Come on, we got a law enforcement question. Mr. Nixon, can you come on? And I used to always go, I want to talk about something else. I got politics, new law enforcement. So generally with Scott, we talk about bombing runs and 155 howitzers and all kinds of things like that. Today, we're going to talk about politics, and I'm going to throw some questions out to Scott, and everybody that knows me that knows I'm a little weird in a way. Here's what I mean. I always look at politics a little different than other people. I'm not saying better or worse. I think I'm just a creative person. So I got some thoughts that I want to throw at you, Scott, that I think I want to get your feedback on. Let's talk politics. All right, let's go. Let's talk about Trump's cabinet. I'm going to throw something at you that nobody talks about. All I've heard is who he's putting in, right? Here's what I'm going to start by calling it. This is his first draft. Here's what I mean. Look at his last time. What did he have? 3 Secretary of States, 4 Secretary of Defense, whatever, right? If you look at Trump's cabinet, there ain't no guarantee he's going to have the same cabinet by January 20th. And I tell you why. I think we look at the Biden cabinet or the traditional cabinets, and it's an executive branch. You're like Blinken's. First of all, Biden's brain dead, but Blinken and Sullivan and these clowns are making all the decisions, right? We're going to do this, then we're going to do that. We're going to do this, then we're going to do that. And old bobblehead Biden, he's lost. Trump's a top-down executive. He's a CEO type, right? So he says, this is what we're going to do. Do this, 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 this. And if somebody pushes back, you are out of here. See ya, Rex Tillerson. Nice knowing you. Next person, right? Trump's a different, and this is not a positive or negative. Trump's a different animal. And I think the assumptions that we make when we see a cabinet, certainly you can take something from that. I think it's different when it comes to Donald Trump. I don't know if that's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm throwing that at you. Scott Ritter, your thoughts on that soliloquy that I started off with.
Well, I think you're right. What I would point out, though, is that he's done this before. This isn't Donald Trump rolling in for the first time like it was in 2016, 2017. He's done this before. And he had 4 years to reflect on mistakes, on what went right, what went wrong, and also to solidify his vision of governance. Whether you agree with it or not, it doesn't matter. Donald Trump's vision of governance. And so I would say that Donald Trump version 2.0 is orders of magnitude more prepared for what's about to happen than Donald Trump version 1.0. His cabinet is not accidental. In fact, I mean, I like one of the bad things about X, Twitter, is the knee-jerk capacity to make a fool out of yourself, or to jump to conclusions. I call it the House of Representatives of social media. Full of people who are doing this, as opposed to the Senate, which is supposed to be looking at things long-term, calmly, etc. And I, like everybody else, when some of these initial cabinet appointments were being made, we're going, what the heck is going on? Two things. One, this was never going to be good for the Palestinian cause. I think everybody understood that going in. So all the people who, like me, are holding that standard out there, it's a stupid standard to hold out. It doesn't mean that it's not a moral standard, but it's a stupid standard. Why? Trump was never going to be good for the Palestinian cause. So when he appoints people that reflect his vision of, Israel and Israel's place in the world, and what you're going to now scream betrayal? He didn't betray anything. He betrayed the Palestinians from the get-go. This was never going to be good. So what I would advise people to do is never forget the Palestinian cause. Of course, we will continue to fight for a free Palestine, but stop using that as a standard to judge the Trump cabinet, because it was never going to be good for Palestine, ever. Now, as you said, Trump is a top-down person. Okay, let me remind people, let's just dissect one of Trump's major foreign policy initiatives undertaken during his first term, and that was denuclearization of North Korea. It was a policy nobody supported but Donald Trump.
And the American people. You got
well,
the American people.
Yeah, but I'm talking within the establishment, within the government. Nobody supported this. Nobody supported this. The Secretary of State didn't support this. And it ultimately betrayed Donald Trump. And I bring this up to point the National Security Advisor didn't support this. So the reason why I bring this up is, people look at Marco Rubio and they're saying, well, he's this, that, and the other thing. Marco Rubio is a senator who is expert at what I call long range sniping. His job is to go on the talk shows and be critical. The buck don't stop on his desk. He can say anything he wants. He can criticize it. He's not responsible for anything. And now he's going to be Secretary of State. Today there was a meeting between Vladimir Putin and between the Russians and the Saudi Arabians where they basically said, hey, we're going to start working together. Resolves a lot of things. People were talking about OPEC plus, are the Saudis and the Russians going to break off, start a war? Is the United States going to split them up? They just came together and said, no, we're in, we're tight. That's the reality that Marco Rubio is going to inherit. And the other reality is that Donald Trump doesn't want a damn war. So Marco Rubio is going to be told from the start, I don't want a war. Hey, Marco, BRICS is out there. Go fix it. And Marco is going to have to build a team to focus on. He's not going to be able to do long range sniping. He's going to have to start solving problems. And that's a completely different posture, especially when you're told from the get-go, and war ain't a solution. We're not going to do war. He brings in a Secretary of Defense nominee, and everybody's like, you can look at all these statements he makes, but there's two statements that stood out to me. And again, I look at it again from the top down thing. The Secretary of Defense is not going to make defense policy. Please understand that. Donald Trump makes defense policy. And Donald Trump's policy guidance are no war, make America stronger, and fix the efficiency of government. This new Secretary of Defense has said, we can't beat China. Straight up said, we can't beat China. Our military can't do it. And he said, our procurement system is broken. It takes forever. It costs us too much money, et cetera. We just saw what his priorities are going to be. Rebuild the American military and rebuild American defense industry. We're not in a position to go to war today. Now, we have these two people, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State. We have a national security advisor who's very hawkish. But again, the National Security Advisor advises the president. You want to know? I think one of the from a national security standpoint, the most important nomination that he made is Tulsi Gabbard.
I was about to say that we agree on that. Most Americans don't know that CIA director will now report to Tulsi Gabbard.
100%. And we all know Ray McGovern.
Yep.
We love Ray McGovern. And Ray McGovern used to do the presidential daily briefing back when it was controlled by the CIA. You know who briefs the president every morning? The Director of National Intelligence. The presidential daily briefing is the responsibility of the Director of National Intelligence. And Tulsi, being a Trump insider, is going to deliver this briefing personally. So Donald Trump is going to wake up every morning with the lovely Tulsi Gabbard. That's a very sexist thing. I apologize for that, but I'm just saying.
Tulsi's beautiful. That's not sexist. That is a firm grasp of the obvious, my friend.
She's a stud too. I don't know if you saw her in that recent Special Forces competition.
She's
tough. Holy cow! But yeah. She's going to come in, and she's intelligent. She's articulate, and she has a worldview that's realistic. It's not governed by phobias and prejudices. She's able to say Bashar al-Assad is probably the best thing for Syria, and we might need to find a way to work with them. Vladimir Putin is right on Ukraine. We might need to. She's going to come in and she's going to set the world stage for Donald Trump. And then Donald Trump's going to take that world stage and turn to the State Department and Department of Defense and say, this is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to do. They're going to be reacting to him, who is going to be reacting to the briefs given to him by Tulsi Gabbard. I am no longer panicked about the national security of the United States. I actually think that Trump, remember that I did that meme where there's 1 in 14 million chance of saving America. Vote Donald Trump. I think we're still on that path of the one right now. For a while there, I thought we were getting diverted off. I think with Tulsi, we're right back on it, because what I just described logically is how, looking at past precedent, the Trump presidency works. He is a top-down leader. He directs. He doesn't. He'll listen, but he's not going. Marco Rubio is not going to come in with a big policy plate paper and say, "Mr. President, this is how we're going to reform the world." Trump's going to throw that away and say, "No, I'm going to tell you how we're going to reform the world. This is what we're going to do, and now you need to go do it." I don't know if Rubio lasts more than 2 years, because it's going to be a very difficult thing for a man possessed of his ego. I think this Secretary of Defense could last 4 years and become one of the most important Secretary of Defenses if his focus is avoiding war, unnecessary war, building up the American military so that if we are called upon to go to war, we can win, and doing something about this $1 trillion defense budget that produces nothing. The fact that we throw all this money out there to reform the way we procure weapons and how we spend our money, and working hand in glove with Elon Musk and Vivek over there at the Department of Governmental Efficiency to find ways to cut. But Trump's election was a revolution. That's the other thing people don't understand. This isn't your normal transfer of power. This is a revolutionary transfer of power. This is a revolution. It's meant to be uncomfortable. It's meant to be different. It's meant to shake things up. So now he's appointed people that are uncomfortable, different, and are shaking things up, have the potential. And we're all shocked. I walked my dogs this morning. Driving in, we have a local radio channel, WAMC. It's like an NPR type thing, public radio. I mean, it is staffed from top to bottom with progressive liberals. And I was listening to this panel. Just, I mean, they are apoplectic over Trump's and his picks and all this kind of stuff. And they're just, I mean, it's to the point where they're cackling fools. They're just sitting there laughing at things that they don't understand, trying to reinvent history to, do this, that, and the other. They don't realize that they are observing a revolution that's going to take them down as well. I mean, this is a revolution that will be societal in scope and scale. The media, the legacy media that sustained progressive liberal thinking is collapsing. Time Magazine collapsed. Washington Post collapsing. They're running out of money. CNN is going to fire Caitlin Collins, probably. Anderson Cooper, because they can't afford to keep them there. MSNBC, are they going to be able to keep Rachel Maddow? Because they can't afford Rachel Maddow.
They're for sale. MSNBC's for sale now. And they ain't
they're
going
all,
to be able to sell. Who'd buy it?
no one's going to buy that. Right. So, and so this is the end. This is a revolution that's taking place, for better or for worse. I'm not sitting here weighing in on it. I'm saying this is going to be a revolution. So strap in, buy some popcorn, and enjoy the ride, because you're going on a ride whether you want to or not.
Well, one of the things I think that's important about Tulsi Gabbard is this difference. When Trump says, what's going on? So if Biden says, what's going on? They say, well, the Russians are fighting with shovels. They're out of missiles and they're collapsing. They're running. North Koreans they've been all replaced with North Koreans. There ain't even any Russians anymore that fight soldiers. They've all been wiped out. I think the Ukrainians lost a Jeep. That's all they lost in the last year is one Jeep. And some guy twisted his ankle. Other than that, they're fine. And the Russians have lost they've been wiped out. There's no more Russians left. That's why they had to replace. So that's what Biden hears. When Trump says to Tulsi Gabbard, what's going on? She's going to say, kind of getting their ass kicked. We better get them the hell out of here. And look, here's what I mean. Something as simple as this, hearing rhetoric that is political based, that is ideologically based to influence the president to do something that his cabinet wants to do that he'd probably already do anyway, right? We're going to give you what you want to hear. The Russians are fighting with shovels and they're out of missiles. Okay. As opposed to somebody who's going to want some detailed information and go in and say, as best as I can figure out, this looks like what's going on. At least, even if Trump makes the wrong decision, the right decision, whatever, you're going to make a different decision if somebody tells you the Russians are fighting with shovels, as opposed to somebody says Ukrainians are running for their life. They're getting the living crap bombed at them with 3,000-pound bombs.
Yeah. Look, when I went through intelligence school, the master sergeant that was instructing this course was, been around the block, and he, Vietnam War, and he had been in Grenada and Lebanon, and he just told us straight up, your job is not to please the boss, to tell the boss what he or she wants to hear. At that time, it was exclusively he. Said, if you lie, the Marines die. You are a literal life saver. Your job is to go in and tell the boss the ground truth, the reality, no matter what the consequences. They may be furious, but if you're telling the truth, that is your defense. I'm not here to whisper sweet nothings in your ear. I'm here to tell you what the reality is so that you can make the right decision based upon the truth. That was the job of an intelligence officer. When you take a look at the intelligence establishment that as it exists today, nobody tells the truth. They all have allowed themselves to be politicized. They tell the president what the president wants. And this goes back to George W. Bush saying we need to fix the intelligence around the conclusion we've reached about weapons of mass destruction. We are saying Iraq has it. Don't tell me the truth. Tell me Iraq has it. That's the message I want. Clapper sat there with the geospatial, what used to be the National Photographic Interpretation Center. And he's the guy that does the imagery analysis. And he told his people, find weapons of mass destruction. Even if it doesn't exist, find an image that suggests it exists. And that's what Powell used to brief people, brief the Security Council. These are liars. I'm just being straight up with you. There's not a single senior level intelligence official that's capable of telling the truth, because their entire career, in order to get promoted, they have lied. They lied about weapons of mass destruction. They've lied about Russia. They've lied about Iraq. They've lied about everything. They cannot tell the truth. This is why Tulsi Gabbard is a breath of fresh air. She, again, one of the things that DNI does is the DNI runs a National Intelligence College. And within the National Intelligence College, you have these national intelligence officers, and they're the experts. So when Congress says, I want to know more about this, that's a directive. Or the president says, I want to know more about that. The DNI turns to a national intelligence officer and says, produce an estimate. And then the national intelligence officer turns to one of their deputies and say, you produce the estimate. And they hire some people and they do the research and they produce the estimate. The national intelligence officer position is an extraordinarily important position. And it has, for instance, on Russia, over the recent years, it's been exclusively staffed by Russophobes, literal Russophobes. I've done the research on them all. They're all Russophobes. They all wrote PhD theses, calling Vladimir Putin the most dangerous dictator in the world. And they all invariably support Ukraine without question. You think you're going to get a balanced, reasoned assessment about Russia out of that? No, their job is to produce a document that confirms their prejudices. That's what they do. Tulsi Gabbard's going to be able to build a national intelligence college staffed by national intelligence officers who aren't going to be politicized. She's going to set the standard, which is, you're not here to make the president happy. That's my job, and I'm going to make him happy by telling him the truth. Your job is to find the truth. No matter how inconvenient it is, find the truth. My God, that's what intelligence is supposed to be about. And yet we have not been doing intelligence for decades now. It has become so corrupt, so politicized. Michael Hayden is a despicable human being who politicized intelligence to the point where he openly violated the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution and said it doesn't matter. because when he was doing national security agency stuff, Edward Snowden blew the covers off this lying sack of poop. We have people in there who believe they can lie to the president. You have Mike Morrell, who believes that he can go around and kill people and do things without God, because he's the director of the CIA. We have a director of operations that is rogue, doing whatever the hell they want to do. This all needs to be shut down, and Tulsi Gabbard's the person that's going to do it. When Trump talks about reforming the national security state, the director of national intelligence is the position to make this happen. The director of the CIA works for her. So John Ratcliffe, who is going to be inclined to support these things, is going to be told by her, stop the Directorate of Operations rogue covert activity right now. Bring it to an end. Turn to the NSA and say, stop illegally monitoring the communications of American citizens. This is what a revolution does. Tulsi Gabbard is a revolutionary who has the integrity to pull it off, as opposed to everybody, without exception, everybody who has populated these positions over the course of the last decade. There has been one honest intelligence official at the senior level, not a single one, because you don't get to be at that level with the establishment by telling the truth. You get there. Look what happened to me when I dared speak the truth. These people don't know how to tell the truth. They're all politicized survivors.
Yeah, and I see people in the chat. Oh, Tulsi's pro-Israel and pro-Zionist and all of that stuff. Yes, but I think what Scott and I are trying to do is have a broader conversation. That's part of the conversation. Nobody be in any parts of government if they weren't. The question is, how do they want to resolve the current issues, conflicts, and contradictions that we find ourselves? Let me throw something. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
Well, on the Israel thing, I just want to say the following. There's no doubt that Tulsi's pro-Israel. She's made that very clear. But she's honest. And here's the thing. Israel is collapsing right now as we speak. It is beyond collapsing. The CIA has been trying to overthrow the Iranian regime for some time now. If I took the reality of Israel, removed Israeli names, wrote Iran and put in Iran figures, and briefed the president about the situation, say, my God, it's in free fall. It's a collapse. We win. It's
just get out of the way. Get out of the way and watch the festivities.
Just watch it fall. This is the reality of Israel. It doesn't matter that Tulsi's pro-Israel. She has to report on the reality. When the president says what's going on, she's going to say they're losing in Gaza. They're losing in southern Lebanon. Iran can beat them at will. Their economy is finished. Politically, they're in free fall and collapse. Mr. President, Israel's a basket case. And so now the president's job is going to be how to save Israel, not make Israel stronger. A completely different policy directive, which has to incorporate reality. And if you don't think between now and January 20th that there's going to be even greater change in the Middle East that's detrimental to Israel, you aren't following the Middle East. Seymour Hersh just published a Substack that I recommend everybody go and read about what's happening to Benjamin Netanyahu right now, who's committed even more crimes, releasing highly classified information and then misrepresenting it to the Israeli people. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Israelis went into the streets previously protesting about the inability of Netanyahu to bring the hostages home. He has tried to blame it on Sinwar and Hamas. What is happening now is this is proof that he was lying, that he, Netanyahu, undermined this, that these hostages could have been home by now, but he refused to do it. This is a political crisis beyond imagination here in the United States, and it's unfolding. It's so bad the presiding judge had to seal it out of fear that Israel would break up into a civil war. This is how bad it is in Israel. And the president of the United States on January 21st is dealing with that reality, not, Abrams Accord, making relations with this, that, and the other thing. The Saudis have said they will not normalize relations with Israel until there's a Palestinian state. And Trump ain't going to talk them down from that. So Trump now, to be pro-Israel and all this, is going to have to start talking about a Palestinian state. You see, the reality will dictate the policy. It doesn't matter that Trump is pro-Israel. Trump will have to deal with the reality of Israel's collapse. And so I tell people, it doesn't mean that I'm, sympathetic to the Zionist supporting people in Trump's administration. I'm just cognizant of the reality that the reality that they have to deal with is one where Israel, left to its own devices, is going to die, literally die. The Israeli state will cease to exist. Some Israeli generals who are talking to the Israeli media say it will cease to exist within a year. So we're talking about a rapid decline, a rapid collapse. By the summer of 2025, Israel no longer exists. That's one extreme potential. I think it could probably drag it out for another 3 to 5 years. But either way, Israel's going down. And that's the reality that's going to drive U.S. policy, how to save the Zionist state. And as a result, reality will have to inject itself in, and that reality includes a Palestinian state. So for all the people out there that are just, refusing to have any other discussion but Israel, I just told you that the resistance, Iranian-led, has created a reality in the Middle East that the Trump administration can't simply sweep away. Israel is in free fall. It has lost this war, and it is in danger of ceasing to exist as a nation state. That's the reality.
Yeah, Israel, the position they're in is kind of like the old, my dad used to, he's one of those old guys that would tell the same joke over and over. And one of his jokes was, I went to the doctor. He said, I got bad news and worse news. Really, what's the bad news? You got 24 hours to live. What could be worse than that? I forgot to tell you yesterday, right? So yeah. That's Israel. That's Israel right there. They're done. But, and I'll add this. I think we're looking at, with Trump, it's going to be an emotional roller coaster. It's going to be exactly what it is. You're going to wake up in one day and say, oh my God, I can't believe Trump did that. I never thought he'd do I never thought well, that's fantastic. And you're going to wake up the next day and this part of your hand is going to hit this part of your, he didn't do that. Bring that guy. Look forward. That's what Trump's going to be. Get ready for it. Strap in your seatbelt. It's going to be an emotional roller coaster ride. Yeah. Something else I think is of great consequence here. And since the Middle East, again, history is always a good predictor. You got to take this into account. The Saudis are now tight with the Russians and very tight. That, hey, look, man, they're trying to eat. Who's buying the most oil? The Chinese, right? The Gulf states, they love the Chinese because they're buying oil. And of course, the Russians, they recognize their diplomatic and their military power. Everybody's, realize the global South, all of these countries are male dominated. They're male dominated tough guy kind of things, right? They're tough guys. They're old school tough guys. I know the Black community, the Latino community, right? The global South, old school, patriarchal tough guy. And they're looking at Putin and they're saying, you kicked France, Germany, all you know what I mean? All these baguette eating bastards, they all came in up to your border. You told them to stop, they wouldn't stop, and you kicked their ass. That goes over big amongst the Muslim world. They're looking at Putin saying, you're the toughest guy on the block. China, you're buying the most. So they're tight with those guys for a number of reasons. Here's what I'm getting at. Trump is very tight with the Saudis. Very, very good relationship with the Gulf Arab states, with the Saudis. Sold them a lot of weapons, made a lot of money. Perhaps his son-in-law might have got a few dollars, shaved a few off the top, did the old Hunter Biden, but at least he didn't sell pictures. At least they're more open with it, right? He wasn't selling $800,000 finger painting things that look like, a 5-year-old did it, right? Here's my point. The Gulf Arabs have made it clear. The Saudis are now doing military exercises with Iranians and demanding, it's out there. The Saudi MBS has demanded that Israel, and he ain't talking to Israel, he's talking to the US. Israel doesn't attack Iran. They don't want a regional war. They're making too damn much money and things are going well for them. Right? So they want things, man, we're making a lot of money, things are going, we don't want a war. And Trump's tight with those people. I think that has an effect, because in order to clean this thing up in the Middle East, he's going to have to deal with the Saudi Arabias, the UAE, make deals with them, bring them back into the fold. And they're now no longer, we hate Iran. They're now like, Iran's tight with China, we're tight with China, and we're all making money. Let's kind of calm this whole war thing and old Sunni versus Shia thing down, because we're making too damn much money. Anyway, your thoughts on Trump's tight relationship, historical, with the Saudi and the Gulf Arabs, and how that affects the dynamic, and the fact that they don't want any trouble.
Well, remember when Trump went over there during his first presidency, you remember sort of embarrassing to watch as an American, but he was out there doing the sword dance and all this kind of stuff, and
touching some weird orb. Remember that they had some orb that he's I'm like, what the hell is that orb? It gives me creeps.
Anybody who has been in the Middle East knows that the Saudis were just sitting there gaming him, 100% gaming the guy. But they got what they wanted. The Abrams Accords, Trump was all about Israel, about, normalizing relations, putting Israel in, but Saudi Arabia was like, this is going to prop us up as a regional leader. At that time, they were still leaning hard against Iran. They were willing to set up the Sunni shield against the axis of resistance, the Shia crescent. That was Saudi Arabia's policy. And then Trump went away. And Saudi Arabia, the Biden administration came in and kept the Abrams Accords going. But the Biden administration, the thing about Trump is that bluster can only take you so far. The reality was under Trump that he understood we had to start retrograding out of the Middle East to get out of these endless stupid wars. He was talking about withdrawing from Syria, from Afghanistan, the whole thing, retrograde. And he wanted the Saudis to step up and take the lead in creating this Sunni shield that would be paid for by them, not by us. Well, Trump's gone. Biden comes in. Afghanistan is a disaster. I mean, everything Biden touched was a disaster. Nothing went well. China rolls in, again, at Russia's behest. We tend to forget that even though China got all the credit for brokering the rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, it was initiated by Russia. And the Chinese and the Russians come in and they make this deal. It talks about stability, breaking the paradigm of the Sunni shield against the Shia crescent, and saying, live together, work together. BRICS is a game changer. Even though Saudi Arabia is still on the fence on this one, the United Arab Emirates is all aboard. They're a permanent member now. And again, because of the ignorance of the United States, because we don't allow ourselves to focus on Russia, I will tell you this. I was in Kazan in May of 2023, before BRICS. They were receiving Gulf Arab delegations on a daily basis. There are direct flights into Kazan. Kazan is, a Muslim state, but it's a major regional hub. I think it's part of the Russian Federation, but it's an Islamic part of it. Chechnya is receiving Gulf Arab delegations every single week. There's a new delegation coming in because the Chechens are a force to be reckoned with. In the West, we denigrate them, we pick on Kadyrov, we make fun of them, we mock them, but no one in the Islamic world does that, because these are two major Islamic republics within the Russian Federation that are interfacing in a very dynamic and effective way with the Gulf Arabs. And we in the West ignore it because of our prejudices. We're not going to go to Russia. Of course, why would we go to Russia? Well, if you went to Russia, I don't know, maybe you'd get to meet with, Ramzan Kadyrov and have a conversation. Guess who did that? Oh, me. Maybe you'd go to Kazan and meet with the regional actors there and find out what's going on. Guess who did that? Me. That's why the FBI came in and shut me down, because, my God, we can't let Scott Ritter tell the American people about the reality of Russia and what's going on. We have to keep them ignorant, stupid, and susceptible to misinformation. But Saudi Arabia right now knows where its bread is buttered. And it ain't buttered in the United States anymore. Yes, I believe Donald Trump will come in and, attempt to have friendly relations. I think the Saudis will receive him. But the Abrams Accord are dead. They're not going to be, it's over. That was Trump's big diplomatic achievement in the Middle East, and it's gone. It's finished. And the Saudis are going to be telling him new realities. And Tulsi, again, this is the genius of having Tulsi Gabbard. She's going to be there with the president going, yeah, this is a new world, Mr. President. We have to come up with a new way of doing business here. And she's not there to suggest policy. And that's the beauty, because she's not going to be challenging the president on the policy. She's going to say, no, if we do that, the Saudis will respond this way, this way, this way, this way. Marco Rubio is going to be called upon, and he's going to be like, but I don't want to do anything that brings stability to the region. But the president's going to be like, hey, little Marco, come here, buddy. Uppy, heel. Yeah, I need a policy statement about improving relations with Iran. Mr. President, hey, Marco, shut up. You're just the Secretary of State. Tulsi Gabbard just told me that if we don't find a way to improve relations with Iran, we could deteriorate to a war that my Secretary of Defense just told me we can't win. So little Marco, shut up and do what I just told you to do. That's the reality of Marco Rubio's Secretary of State tenure. He is going to be taking instructions from the president to implement policies that he has no say in whatsoever. So I think we're dealing with a new reality here. It's also, listen to what Trump has said about Iran. He has said that he wants to lift sanctions with Iran, that he thinks that Iran can succeed economically, and that that's what he'd like to do, where everybody succeed. He said he's not interested in regime change in Iran, which is a complete deviation from Israeli policy, which says we got to get the theocracy out of there. Benjamin Netanyahu has been, spewing nonsense about, talking directly to the Iranian people about rising up and getting rid of your. I don't know if you saw the most recent one where he said, those missiles you sent in, they did negligible damage to us, but they cost you billions of dollars. Is that how you want your money spent? Billions of dollars. The Iranian people should rise up until they don't understand. The Iranian people were tickled pink when those missiles.
Yeah, exactly. Celebrating in the streets.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a new world. Donald Trump's going to have to adjust to this new world. And there are the good news is there are solutions out there to be had, but these solutions have to be founded upon sound analysis of the reality of the situation. And again, I don't want to prop Tulsi up too much, because nobody's perfect, nobody is great, but the greatest thing in the world, there's faults there's blinders, there's everything. She's never operated at this level before in her life, so this will be new. There's a bureaucracy she's going to have to learn how to tackle and manage, but she is the best hope we have of having somebody speaking to Trump in the morning. And as you said, every day is either going to be, oh, wow, or, oh, because Trump is just going to be, Trump is going to be Trump.
Yes, he's a volatile character.
Yeah, but Tulsi's the person that every morning gets to set the stage. It's like a reset, boom, Mr. President, this is what's going on. And I couldn't think of a better person. You take a look at who Trump had in before, Dan Coates. He hated Dan Coates. Dan Coates hated him. Or he brought in an absolute yes man in the end. I think Radcliffe was brought in to be an interim DNI in the final months. Just a yes man. We don't need a yes man. We need somebody who comes in and tells the truth. And Tulsi is a commissioned officer in the United States Army. Integrity is imbued in her every fiber. And I believe that she will tell the president the truth, the hard truth, the inconvenient truth, but the truth nonetheless.
Yeah. So again, I understand. People in the chat are upset. Well, no, you guys are on hopium. Nobody's got any. This is not about hope. Right. Exactly. This is not about hope. This is about trying to evaluate what's going on, understanding that the dynamics have changed.
Just tell the people in the chat, guys, this is going to happen, whether you want it to or not. I don't really give a flying rat's ass what you think, because it doesn't matter. This is going to happen. I mean, and it's going to get worse, people, because if you're thinking the Senate is going to come in and, you know, do its advise and consent role in the Constitution, Trump is pushing for recess appointments, which means there won't be any Senate confirmation, not the traditional sense. And so everybody's like, well, Tulsi will never make it through. The Secretary of Defense nominee will make it through. If it's a recess appointment, they're in like Flynn. And guess who else is in too? And this would require shifting to domestic, but Matt Gaetz, the most revolutionary person in the. And if you want to think that I'm unhappy about Matt Gaetz, you don't know a damn thing about me. Guess who visited me on August 7th, ladies and gentlemen? The FBI. The FBI visited my home, empowered by the Department of Justice, which put forward whatever that is, whether it's an indictment, a sealed indictment, who knows, because of free speech.
Yep.
Because they disagree with what I am saying. And this isn't a one-up. The FBI has been doing this on a regular basis since 1998, when they were indicted me and were pursuing me for espionage, a manufactured case because I dared do my job and work with Israel to disarm Iraq with the permission of the CIA, by the way. They had to drop that charge, but the FBI, when I made my movie in Iraq, the FBI harassed me then, followed me to the airport, took, you know, photographs of me to try and intimidate me, surrounded me with cars. The FBI has been on my case from day one. They promised to do so. When I resigned from my position as a weapons inspector, I was told by the head of the CIA liaison in New York that the FBI will F me in the butt for the rest of my life. So if you think for a second I am going to sit there and go, oh no, Matt Gaetz wants to bring down the FBI, you're wrong. The National Security Division of the FBI is one of the greatest threats to American security today. They are anti-American. They operate in complete violation of the Constitution, and they work at the behest of the National Security Division of the Department of Justice, which is about oppressing American civil liberties, not defending American civil liberties. They've been politicized, they've been weaponized, and they need to go. It's a revolution, baby. And we got the guy that's going to run the guillotine nominated for the position. Is he perfect for the job? For a revolution? Yeah. His job is to take heads. His job is to execute. This is the vengeance that Trump was talking about, and it's going to happen. And to be honest, I'm not unhappy about it, because I have spent the last 26 years living under the tyranny of a Department of Justice out of control, of an FBI out of control. They came into my damn house without probable cause. They manufactured probable cause. All right. And this is not a good thing. And they came into the homes of the Uhura Three. They've come into homes of many Americans who have simply voiced opposition to the policies of the Biden administration or previous administrations. That's not what the FBI's job is, and yet they've made it their job. That's not the role of the National Security Division of the Department of Justice is, but they've made it their job. And Matt Gaetz, if you go in and take a look at the grilling he gave Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, or the grilling he gave Merrick Garland, the current Attorney General, I couldn't think of anybody better for the job. A revolutionary job. I'm not talking about business as usual, going in there and managing it and business. I'm talking about going in and tearing down the corrupt edifice that the Department of Justice has become. Matt Gaetz is the guy. That's my position.
Yeah, there's some things it's going to be interesting to see if he looks in. Hopefully we won't have to wait 75 years now to see Seth Rich's laptop. Be interesting to see some things like that I think Gaetz will look into. They're in deep and serious trouble with Gaetz. Again, I would say, yeah, is there going to be things I absolutely disagree with them? Sure. But some of those things that happened over the last few years need to be looked into. And now, whether they can do this or not, they're talking about looking into where the money went in Ukraine. Ooh, that's a real systemic issue. Whether they'll be able to do that, I don't know. But so there's some things. There's hope. No, it's not hopium. There's hope that, you know what? If there's 10 things you want, and you know that if Kamala Harris got elected, not only would you not get any of those 10 things that you want, you get 10 more things that you don't want. So if Matt Gaetz does one thing, that's one thing more than you would have got otherwise. So I'm all for that. Okay. Something else that I think is of great consequence, and I want to get your thoughts on. the world dynamics have dramatically changed since Donald Trump was president. Dramatically. Let me say this about BRICS. People are like, why would they let Turkey into BRICS? Turkey's they're probably going to be, they're going to be a spy inside of the gate. They're going to be enemy inside of the wire. Don't let. I've listened to Glenn Beason talk about it. I've listened to a lot of other people talk about it. And here's something I think is interesting. I've come to a different conclusion. Rather than Russia and China are got to build a block, and BRICS is going to be a block against the U.S., right? It's something far worse. They're against building blocks. So what BRICS is saying is, what the U.S. wants is a nice, clean block. I mean, what the neocons want is a nice, clean block. Here's our group, and here's us. There's their group, and there's them. And then we can tell our people, these are the evil. Look over there. Those are the evil guys. We're the good guys. It's nice and clean. The neocons like a nice, clean line. The good guys are on that side of the bad guys are on that side of the line. We're the good guys. We're on this side of the line. The real strength in what Russia and China is doing is that they're pushing against that block concept, saying, kind of like Abraham Lincoln would say, kind of like you're seeing with people like me who are far lefties and dealing with libertarians and conservatives and MAGA people and all this stuff going on. It's saying the things that we agree on that are important, the First Amendment, whatever it may be, let's work on those things together. The things we disagree on, I'll go work on the thing I want, you go work on the things you want. We can come together to make money in BRICS, and we can depart where there's maybe some differences, maybe culturally, whatever, right? The big threat to the neocons is not Russia and China building a bloc. It's them creating a dynamic, a non-aligned kind of movement where people can say, look, you can be aligned with the U.S. on certain things, and we'll still take you in BRICS. We're just trying to make money. And now it prevents the neocons from building that black line with one group on the other side. It's an anti-block block. I think I'm losing myself down some kind of a rabbit hole, but you get my point, Scott.
No, 100%. Look, when Putin and Xi came together in Beijing on February 4th, 2022, on the eve of the Beijing Winter Olympics, again, I just want to point out, how utterly stupid the United States can be at times. Joe Biden could have traveled to Beijing to be part of the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics. Had he done that, the world we live in might be totally different. Why do you say that? Because had he done that, Xi Jinping would have had to pay a lot of attention to him. A lot of attention. I mean, this is a big deal. The American president coming, we got to receive him, all that. And he may not even had time to meet with Vladimir Putin. And that 5,000-word joint statement that they published may not have been published on time and might have been modified afterwards if Biden had just come in and said, hey, glad to be here. Look forward to working with you more on the international stage. Want to reintroduce you to my national security advisor and Secretary of State. We got off on a little bit of a bad foot there in Alaska. But we're positive thinkers here and all this stuff. Total disruption of the Chinese-Russian dynamic at a very important stage. Instead, Biden stayed away. Putin came in and they published this 5,000-word joint statement that basically declared war against the rules-based international order. And people need to read this statement. It's definitive. It's not we're thinking about it, maybe down the road, we are declaring war against the rules-based international order. It's over, finished for us. We're not going back. We're only going forward. And they mentioned 3 multilateral forums that could challenge it: BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the G20. And they treated all 3 relatively the same at that time. But then what happened is BRICS grew. I mean, it got more relevant. The Russians made a ploy in 2022 about the need for a currency to challenge the dominance of the dollar. The world wasn't ready for it because BRICS had to mature as an institution. In 2023, under South African leadership, BRICS expanded, brought in 6 members. Argentina dropped out. Saudi Arabia went on the fence, but 4 became permanent members, including United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Iran, Ethiopia. They're there now. They're in the big game. And this year, 2024, Russia hosted the BRICS summit and institutionalized it, made it a mature, functioning establishment with institutions capable of, coordinating on a consensus-driven basis policies of, from a multilateral perspective. It's not being dictated by the United States as, the G7 and NATO and things are. It's different, and they've institutionalized it. The world is a completely different place today than it has ever been. BRICS is, far more complex. People keep thinking about BRICS as if, because they're expecting things to happen right now.
Right.
That's not how it works, guys. You want a baby? Well, find a wife, make your relationship what it's supposed to be. And then you have to wait. There's a gestation period. You do the conceiving, a lot of fun, but then you have to have the gestation before you give birth. And what you give birth to requires a lot of caring before it grows up and becomes something that's capable of going on its own. BRICS, Kazan, I view it as the honeymoon. They went out there and they made whoopee. And now they've got to wait, and they've got a gestation period where this thing has to grow and develop. And then they're going to give birth to something. And then they have to take care of it and nurture it, and it will grow. But we're past the point of no return. The baby's in the belly, and so it's going to happen. And there's nothing that, that's going to be done to stop it. This is the reality of the Russian-Chinese dynamic. This didn't exist during Trump's first term. This didn't exist at all. It exists today, and Trump's going to have to deal with it. BRICS, as you said, isn't about creating a bloc that's anti-American. I mean, Putin has said straight up, because there's been a lot of focus put on de-dollarization. And Putin said, you do know that we didn't stop using the dollar. The dollar stopped allowing us to use it. And so we have to adjust to that. Look at Turkey. You mentioned Turkey and coming over. Why did Turkey find BRICS to be attractive? Because the EU wouldn't let them play. The EU wouldn't let them in. The European Union. Turkey wanted to be part of the West. The EU blocked them out. They're going on. Hungary is going to be gravitating this way. What's happening in Germany right now? We see the total collapse. You and I talked about this a long time ago, and we predict. I know I predicted revolutionary change in Germany. Revolutionary change brought about by the total collapse of the German economy and society because of sanctions. I wrote a paper on it in December of 2021, said exactly what's going to happen. It's happening. And so now we have a situation that's fascinating because there's going to be snap elections, and the party that's going to, the Japanese just stopped doing sanctions and doing business with Russia. The Japanese are back in business in the car business in Russia. But Germany, they're going to have snap elections. The party that's positioned to win is the Alternative for Deutschland, AfD party. At a time when Germany and the EU is going to Georgia, which had elections on October 26th, kept the Georgia Dream Party in power, no evidence of foul play, but they're all screaming, oh, no, you can't do this. You can't let a pro-Russia, blah, 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 blah. AfD is positioned to have a governing majority in this election. How does Germany, the democracy, respond? Lawmakers are panicking, running around saying they're going to ban the AfD party, ban it. The party that will be able to get a ruling majority in a fair and free election, they're now talking about banning it. And if you think this is going to go over well in Germany, think again. We're talking about the potential of revolutionaries in the street. And if Germany goes revolutionary, it's game, set, match for Europe, guys.
Yeah.
It's a house of cards that's going to collapse in.
Let me ask you this too. That's the other thing we got going on. We got these European ruling elites, who the weird liberal crazies, who they were convinced that Kamala was going to win, and they were all shocked at Trump, and now they're in shock and they're saying crazy things. Bojo, we might have to send troops. Really? I don't think the Russians are scared. They mean troop. They don't put an S on them end. They got like a guy with a backpack they can send. That ain't going to work well.
F troop. You remember that?
That's true. That's like Agorn. And then now the French are saying we might have a couple thousand troops to send. The Russians are like, yawn. Don't do it, guys. Just don't do this to yourself, right? Which is all bluster. We know that. Trump comes in. He don't like these people. They're Biden kind of people. You know what I mean? I don't like these people. You don't like these. You know, Macron and Schultz and their own citizens don't like these people. Nobody likes them, right? Your thoughts on Europe? Somebody could start asking questions about what happened in Nord Stream. Perhaps it wasn't the half a dozen Ukrainians in a sailboat. You know, you got Orban sitting there and Fico, again, lefty, righty. But they're both sitting there grinning with that "I told you so" look on their face. Your thoughts on the dynamics in Europe? How does? Let me add this: people are saying NATO can't survive. One thing about NATO, if the truth about Article 5, right? Article 5, yes, you know, is for those who don't know, it doesn't mean everybody has to join in the war. It just means if something happens, countries can act as they see fit. So Article 5 could sit there forever because it doesn't mean that everybody has to jump in a war. And don't look like there's going to be no war from the jump in anyway. So that's a whole other story. But at any rate, your thoughts on what will be revolutionary, maybe a strong word, significant changes coming to Europe. They bet on the Biden administration, and the Biden administration got knocked off the island. Yeah. And now that has to be dealt with. Oh, and again, the Russians are smart. The reason I put that up, the Russians are smart. The Russians are looking at the Europeans and saying, you know, guys, go take your business back over here. We got a nice big block and you can make some money. That's going to be very appealing to a person at Volkswagen that just got laid off.
Yeah. I mean, Volkswagen is one of these tells for not just Germany, but Europe. You know, under the Biden administration, Europe was put under a lot of pressure to do what's called de-risking. You see, because we wanted to punish China, we wanted to sanction China, we wanted to isolate China. But we couldn't, you know, we didn't want to be aggressive because we want to be friendly with China while we screw them. And so it wasn't called, sanctioning or we're pulling out isolation. It was called de-risking. We have to de-risk our supply chains. And so Olaf Scholz, the failed chancellor of Germany, flew to China. Ursula von der Leyen flew in behind him, the EU, and they were going to put pressure on China to line up against Russia, to stop helping the Russians, to sanction the Russians. And the thing was de-risking. You know, while you support Russia, we have to de-risk. And the Chinese are like, okay, you got to do what you got to do. The Scholz brought like 48 CEOs of different German companies along with him. And one of them was VW. And he pulled Scholz aside. He said, let me talk to you a little bit about de-risking here, buddy. You understand that in the entire Volkswagen enterprise, global enterprise, we're losing money everywhere, because of you, because of your stupid policies. We're losing money. The only thing that keeps us in the black is China. That's the only thing. And now you're telling me to de-risk, to pull out, to pull back. If we do this, it all collapses. Volkswagen shuts down. And all the other industries were telling Scholz the same thing. This is what happened to Germany. They committed suicide, literal suicide. Now, the beauty of it is, as you said, with Russia and China, under the right conditions, they'll just open their doors back up and say, come back in and play. And all the little compliant European companies will do so because it's called business. Trump understands this, by the way. Trump understands business. He understands the transactional nature of this.
I think he'll give Russia their money back too. I think he'll.
They're going to have to. They're going to have to.
All that money that you took from Russia, give it back to him because again, he's a businessman and he knows.
Are you ready for Trump? The beauty of Trump.
Yeah.
You get the money back, and then he's going to turn to Europe and go, those billions of dollars that you took, the profits that you went and sent to Ukraine, you got to pay Russia back that too.
Oh yeah.
You got to give Russia everything, all their principal and all the interest. That's what's going to happen. Europe is falling apart as we speak. this dream of a European Union was always a very difficult dream to implement. People tend to forget that there's always been a historic split between Paris and Berlin about monetary policy within the European Union. Even when it was healthy, it was unhealthy. You do remember there was a crisis in Greece, right? You remember that big crisis in Greece that almost tore the European Union apart? Well, there's a crisis in the south, in Italy, in southern Italy, in Portugal, in Spain. There's all sorts of problems in Europe that have been papered over. They can't be papered over. Now we've thrown in, the fact that Europe is itself just collapsing. What's we're seeing in Germany could be repeated elsewhere. NATO is over. NATO is finished. When Rutte, the former Dutch prime minister, took over from Stoltenberg, I wrote that he could very well be the last secretary general that NATO ever has. And the more I reflect on this, the more I think I'm right. NATO can't survive another embarrassment. The defeat in Afghanistan, we forgot about it because we jumped in with 2 feet into Ukraine. But the fact is, Afghanistan destroyed the credibility of NATO. NATO hasn't recovered internally from that disaster. That's why I have to chuckle every time I see General Bauer, or Admiral Bauer, that German, out there saying, if it weren't for nuclear weapons, we could go in and kick Russia's butt. With what? You got nothing. You are a fundamentally broken organization that is comprised of fundamentally broken nations. And the defeat in Ukraine, and it's happening, ladies and gentlemen. We aren't going to get into the, what caliber of artillery shells being used today, but it's happening. Ukraine has lost this war. It's inevitable. Even Rutte had to acknowledge, they're losing the war. It's over. And the defeat for the Ukrainians is the defeat of NATO. And this defeat of NATO will destroy NATO. NATO cannot recover from this because this defeat is happening at the same time that European economy is collapsing. And the only savior for the European economy is to reopen economic relations with Russia and BRICS and China and all of that economic potential. So Europe is going to be remade in a way. Again, it's revolutionary. I'm not saying this is for better or for worse, although I do believe that the collapse of NATO is for the better for the world. It's an institution that has lost all legitimacy, doesn't have any reason to exist. It's not a defensive alliance, it's an offensive alliance. And it just has become a tool of the kind of foreign policy that Donald Trump no longer supports. And hey, guys, he won the election. So, I think NATO is going to collapse. The European Union is going to collapse. And the United States isn't going to do anything to stop it because Trump has been fundamentally against this stuff. South Korea reconsidering arming Ukraine. That links to the North Korean soldier story in this what I call fiction, because there's no evidence that North Korea has dispatched combat troops into Kursk to fight, none whatsoever. But the Ukrainians are using the fiction of the story, which has been propagated by the United States and others, again without evidence, to get the South Koreans to step in and provide assistance, which they desperately need. And South Korea has shown itself to be stupid enough to to move in that direction. But that's not going to save Ukraine. Ukraine can't be saved. It's over.
And I think here's what we're seeing. Look, when the Biden people, neocons were in and, hey, South Korea, we need you to send some weapons. Yeah, they do what they were told. They get squeezed a little bit. Everybody's looking at the writing on the wall, and everybody knows there's a new sheriff in town. And now I guarantee you, the Biden people, what's going on. They're calling them and saying, look, quick, before Trump comes in, we need you to spend $10 million worth of stuff. And the South Koreans are like, didn't you start off by saying now that Trump won? Yeah. No.
Let's go back to that first part of the sentence.
Yeah. In about 2 months, this is going to be problematic for us. And we know this guy, the last time he was there, he was marching over to South Korea, shaking North Korea, trying to get a deal. He ain't going to like this. So now, basically, all of the things that the Biden administration kind of bullied people, they bullied a lot of these smaller countries. Do this, send this, give this up. A lot of these countries now, they didn't do it of their own. It wasn't an organic reason that they did these things. They got bullied. Even Japan. Japan is, if you're following Japan, they've had some major, what is it? The LDP have ruled since like the 40s or something, and they're losing rule. They're starting to, the Japanese are starting to say, you know, perhaps we should go in another direction. The dynamic in Asia is changing. I think that free crap to Taiwan, Trump ain't much on free stuff. You know what I mean? Free weapons to Taiwan, he ain't signing off on that. Mainly because it's free, and he's cheap as hell when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I think we're looking at, lastly, if you could talk, do me a favor, your thoughts before we go, Asia, your thoughts on that. What changes there?
I mean, let's look at what happened earlier this week. Last week, I believe, the Philippine president signed 2 new laws into effect, which asserted Philippine sovereignty over a variety of shoals and reefs and such in the South China Sea that are, in dispute. One of them is the Scarborough Shoals, located to the west of Luzon, the major Philippine island. China on Sunday, and remember, this is happening after Trump has won, so China knows who's coming in to be the next American president. So China did what they call baseline of measurements. So they said that, the Scarborough Shoals is defined by the following geographic coordinates, and that's important because once you establish those coordinates, you establish territorial waters, and you establish the economic zone, the economic zones. So China said Scarborough Shoals is ours. This is how we define it, and now we have defined territorial waters and economic zones of interest. And then I think yesterday or 2 days ago, they held major military exercises there. And they said, yeah, it's Chinese territory. We're defending it. They put a marker down. This is after the Biden administration went in and reaffirmed the importance of the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty with the Philippines, that we're going to be there for them. Japan made noise about doing joint military exercises and all this stuff. And China went, yeah, Scarborough Shoals is ours, and we're going to defend it to the death. And what are you going to do about it? Knowing that the Biden administration is out, Trump's coming in, and Trump's going to sit there and say, he's going to turn to his Secretary of Defense and say, "Hey, can we do anything in Scarborough Shoals? Can we do anything?" He say, "No, if we go to war with China, we lose. We're not ready." So I think Trump's going to come into the Philippines and say, "Sorry, you lost it," or at least China is initiating that. My point is this: that we don't have a strong position in the Pacific. We took far too long to pivot to the Pacific, and we've pivoted in the wrong ways. It's like if you have a house that needs to be maintained, and we're talking about structures. We need to do some basic structural work. But I decided that I was just going to repaint the outside. It looks nice, but did I actually solve any of the structural problems? The answer is no. We have gone to Australia, and we have put a Marine base in Australia, and we were rotating through a battalion-sized force there. We're now bringing it up to a brigade-sized force, but it's in Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, please look at the map of where Australia is, where the United States is, how much distance is there to sustain this brigade, and realize that a brigade of 5,000 Marines, while they're full of hard-charging guys, doesn't change the dynamic of anything. It's just the beginning of a larger buildup that now has to come across the Pacific, and we don't have the Navy to do that. That's the painting that's taking place. We've gone to South Korea and Japan, and we've created this new alliance, but it's paint. There's nothing real there. We've talked about, backing up with nuclear weapons, et cetera. But the second you talk the second somebody says, nuclear weapons, we're in the land of ridiculous now, because the second you use nuclear weapons, it's all over. It doesn't matter.
I got to add one other quick thing that's important. Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard, have you heard her tell that story about she was in Hawaii and all the phones went off, and they said it was a mistake or whatever, that the missile was fired, and people were running around Hawaii scared to death because they thought it was all over, and she was scared and everybody was scared. She's from Hawaii. home of the whatever 5th Fleet, 6th Fleet, whatever fleet's there. They know good and damn well that the first missile coming from Asia is going to turn Hawaii into a pile of volcanic ash, right?
Yeah, North Korea.
So, yeah, she's the one that said is going to look at it and say, yeah, everybody I know at home is dead if we push anything in China. Talk about somebody that has an incentive not to go to war and to have some kind of a nuclear exchange with China. Ain't nobody you could have better than Tulsi Gabbard, in my opinion.
No, I agree. And also, I would say that this new Secretary of Defense nominee, he, working with the Pentagon, he participated in multiple war games where we were going up against China, and we lost every single time, every single time. And so he knows. He's just sitting there going, well, and when you take a look at this alliance we've built with the South Koreans and the Japanese, what did we get out of it? South Korea's entire reason for being is unification with the North. That's what it's all about. South Korea is nothing without the North. They've said that's what we want. Kim Jong-un, after doing his new business deals with Russia and everything, he said, yeah, we don't want to be part of the South anymore. We're not just thinking reunification. You're on your own. He blew up the roads, blew up the rails, and said, we're done. We're not part of it. And the South doesn't know how to handle it because their whole reason to exist is to reunify with the North. And now that's gone. The South is Japan doesn't like the South Koreans very much because because there was a war where Japan occupied the Korea, and the South Koreans tend to hold the Japanese to account for that. So this alliance that we created is already collapsing. It's one that we pay an inordinate amount of money to. You remember when Trump was in last time, he stopped the military exercises that were taking place because they were deemed to be provocative. This alliance will be relooked at. Our entire posture will be looked at. I'm not saying Trump has the answers, but what I'm saying is Trump is inheriting a Pacific region where the United States has lost all influence. China is dominant. And we're going to have to look at a different way of doing business. Again, Trump has said that he's inclined to lift sanctions, to start working together with the Chinese in a cooperative fashion, to turn our relationship away from what had become almost a military adversarial relationship under Biden into something different. Can he do it? I don't know. Maybe not. But the Pacific is going to be a major theater of engagement, and how Trump acts is going to define it. I don't think he's going to continue to do business as usual because, again, he has a Secretary of Defense that said, boss, we can't do anything. Every time we ran a war game, we lost. We have to rebuild our military, which means then he's going to, that means we need to rebuild relationships. And then he's going to turn to Rubio, who hates China, by the way. And he's going to tell Marco, you got to fix China. I think what we're going to see in a Trump administration is a lot of special envoys. Because Marco Rubio, there's no way he sits down with the Chinese and cuts a deal. I think they'll send a special envoy who will do the negotiation, and Trump will be the deal, the guy who seals the deal. I think Pompeo is going to be baggage because his positions are so radical, and there's no way Pompeo can have any credibility.
Rubio, you said
Pompeo. I'm sorry, Rubio. Yeah, well, I use Pompeo because
same difference.
The same thing. Rubio has no credibility whatsoever with the Chinese or the Russians. Can you imagine Lavrov? I mean, he would because he's a professional diplomat. But Lavrov sitting across from Marco Rubio is going to be like, there's nothing serious going to happen here. There has to be a special envoy that has the ability to interface respectfully and responsibly with the Russians and with the Chinese. And again, I don't think Marco Rubio lasts more than 2 years. I think we get up to the midterm elections, and I think Rubio was picked because Trump owes Adelson a favor. And he took $100 million from the widow, and she whispered in his ear, Marco has to be part of your administration in a significant way. So he gave Marco the Secretary of State. But the Secretary of State, Donald Trump is his own Secretary of State. Ask Tillerson, ask Pompeo, and ask Rubio when he quits in 2 years.
Do you have time for one more question? One last
Sure.
question. Okay. And again, it's important. This is an important question. The one thing we know about Rubio is he hates the Venezuelans. I think his job is Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, the Latin America. He's going to be the Monroe Doctrine guy that comes in and says, we're going to once and for all put Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua in their place, and Bolivia, all of them, or put them in their place. The Russians are building a plant in Bolivia with Bolivians where they're going to process the lithium. So there's going to be no more you buy the raw lithium and you process it and the Bolivians don't make money. They're going to process it and they're going to sell it to you at market price, right? Okay. Bolivia is becoming a BRICS partner, I believe, country. I'm just reading that, right? Okay, so here's my point. The days when you could just march into the Russians have just signed a deal with Venezuela that includes like military stuff, right? All kinds of stuff with Venezuela. The days when the U.S. could send a couple of spooks to Venezuela or anywhere in the, the School of the Americas, do whatever the hell they wanted and go overthrow any country they wanted and dominate anybody in Latin America and take their oil and bananas and stuff. I think if they think that Marco Rubio in the era of BRICS, in the era of multipolarity, is just going to go take out Venezuela, who my understanding is they've got help from both Chinese and Russian intelligence to help them find people that are creeping around trying to take out Maduro and things like that. So the days when you could just go into Latin America, as Rubio would want to do, overthrow countries willy-nilly, I think the Rubio people are going to find that there's a whole lot more horsepower from the big boys in Latin America, where it's not necessarily military, but it's intelligence, it's economic, etc. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. Again, remind your audience, Juan Guaido is a Donald Trump invention. And Donald Trump tried successive military coups against Maduro and failed. And the situation has changed. It's only gotten far worse for the United States in Latin America and South America under the 4 years of Biden. The world that Trump's inheriting is a completely different world. Maduro is cemented in, and he's the Russians and the Chinese are backing him up, with intelligence, with economic support, etc. Look at France Afrique. What happened to France in the Sahel in the last 4 years? They've been evicted from Burkina Faso, from Mali, from Niger. They're in the process of being evicted from Chad and elsewhere. Russia's come in. What did Russia do in Burkina Faso? They're going to build a nuclear power plant. They're working with these nations, not just to extract wealth, but to make wealth. That is, to take wealth out of the ground, build the factories in these African countries that produce the products so that they have the employment vehicles. They turn raw material into more valuable commodities that then are sold so they make the money. This model is being transferred into South America. And I think we're going to see in the course of the next 4 years, which is the Trump second term, that there's going to be an anti-neo-colonial, because America's relationship with South America is a neo-colonial relationship. We are the overlords. And I think you're going to see a transition away from that as Russia and China seek the economic engagement, the economic empowerment of nations like Bolivia, Peru, and others. And it just redefines it. And so if Marco Rubio thinks he's going to be able to make a phone call to Southern Command and say, hey, we need you to intervene in all this, Southern Command is going to say, no, we can't do it. Southern Command's been watching what's going on right now in terms of Chinese investment. I guess there's a port that China's putting in Tangay,
Peru. We just seen it.
Peru, I guess Peru, and so they're building this super port in Peru. They've already started doing test shipments. They've brought in these container ships. Then they use it to receive the container ships and then use it to send Chinese goods up to Ecuador, Colombia, down to Chile, etc. into Brazil using the Amazon conduit. This is China injecting itself in a major way into South America, and we've got nothing to compete with. We don't. And the Southern Command's watching it, saying, "Oh, there's nothing we can do." What do you want us to do? Invade Peru? I mean, that's pretty much it. And the Secretary of Defense is going to say, "Well, we can't do that. We don't have any troops," because that's the reality. So we're going to be looking at radical transformation of Latin America and South America outside of away from the American gravitational orbit. The pull that we used to have, which was premised on economic domination, political intimidation, and military oppression. Just ask Panama what happens when you try to pull out of the American-only orbit. That's over. Those days are done. And I think we're looking at a whole new dynamic that's going to play out over the course of the next decade.
Hey, everybody, don't forget, go to
Go figure. Follow me.